Ever looked at a bizarre contraption, some wild, spinning, flashing gadget that seems too strange to be real, and wondered, who on earth came up with that? You might be surprised to learn that more often than not, the answer is right here in the United States. From the quirky corners of garages to the high-tech halls of innovation, America has long been a hotbed for some of the most incredible, outrageous, and downright confounding inventions the world has ever seen. We're talking about creations that blur the line between genius and madness, objects so peculiar they make you stop and ask, was this sheer brilliance or just a really ambitious mistake? Today, we're diving headfirst into that very question as we count down 33 of the craziest American inventions ever conceived. These aren't your everyday, run-of-the-mill innovations. Oh no, we're exploring everything from those legendary Eureka moments that change the world overnight to the ones that leave you scratching your head, muttering, "Wait, that was American." It's a journey through decades of imagination, ambition, and sometimes just a little bit of chaos. A salute to the dreamers and tinkerers who looked at the world and asked, "What if?" Even when the answer was something nobody saw coming. So buckle up, because we're about to take a wild ride through a side of American history you probably never learned in school. A place where creativity knows no bounds, where curiosity is king, and where the results range from revolutionary to wonderfully ridiculous. Whether these inventions soared to spectacular success or crashed in spectacular failure, each one tells a story of risk, vision, and the relentless American spirit to build, experiment, and dream big. You're in for surprises, laughs, and more than a few moments of pure disbelief. Let's begin. Our first stop on this journey of innovation begins not in a pristine laboratory, but with a melted candy bar and a curious mind. It was 1945, and an engineer named Percy Spencer was working for the defense contractor Raytheon, deeply involved in the development of magnetrons, the powerful vacuum tubes that generate microwaves for radar systems. One day, while standing near an active magnetron, Percy reached into his pocket and discovered a gooey, melted mess. The peanut cluster bar he'd stashed there had been cooked by the invisible radiation emanating from the device. Where most people might have just been annoyed at the loss of a snack, Spencer saw a revelation. He was intrigued enough to try another experiment, this time with a kernel of popcorn. It popped, then he pointed the magnetron at an egg, which, as the story famously goes, promptly exploded in the face of a brave colleague. In that moment, the microwave oven was born. Spencer and Raytheon quickly patented the idea and introduced the world's first commercial microwave oven in 1947. They called it the Radarange. But this was a far cry from the sleek countertop appliance we know today. This first model was an absolute behemoth, standing nearly 6 feet tall, weighing over 750 pounds, and requiring a plumbing connection for water to cool its massive magnetron. And the price tag, a staggering $5,000. That's over $60,000 in today's money. Unsurprisingly, it wasn't exactly a hot item for the average household, finding its first customers in restaurant galleys and railroad kitchens. It would take 2 more decades of refinement, miniaturization, and cost reduction before the microwave oven truly found its way into our homes. But when it did, it fundamentally reshaped how we think about food, time, and convenience. It gave us speedy popcorn and reheated pizza, yes, but it also transformed global eating habits, fueled the frozen food industry, and gave us back precious minutes in our day. All of this from a chance discovery, a testament to the power of paying attention to the unexpected and seeing potential where others see only a mess. It's a perfect American story of wartime technology finding a profoundly peaceful and delicious purpose. Now, while Percy Spencer was turning military tech into a kitchen marvel, another American innovator was on a quest to make a different kind of noise, a much, much louder one. In the big band era of the 1940s, if you were a guitarist, you had a serious problem. Your instrument was simply being drowned out. Acoustic guitars couldn't compete with the blaring horns and pounding drums. They were relegated to the rhythm section, felt more than heard. But a man named Lester William Pulsfuss, whom the world would come to know as Les Paul, refused to accept that. A brilliant musician and a relentless tinkerer, Les was obsessed with finding a way to make the guitar sing out as a lead voice. His experiments began years earlier, but his Eureka, a moment, arrived in 1941, and it was born from a very simple, almost crude idea. Frustrated by the howling feedback that occurred when he tried to amplify his hollow-bodied acoustic guitar, Les decided to remove the source of the problem, the hollow body itself. He took a 4x4 piece of solid pine, literally a chunk of lumber, and sawed it down the middle, attaching a guitar neck right down the center. He then bolted two homemade guitar bodies, sawn in half from an Epiphone acoustic, onto the sides of the block purely for appearance's sake, because let's be honest, it looked strange. He called his creation the log. It was ungainly, it was bizarre, but when he plugged it in, it was revolutionary. That solid core of wood eliminated the resonant feedback that had plagued amplified guitars, allowing for a clean, sustained, and powerfully clear electric tone that could soar over any orchestra. It was the birth of the solid-body electric guitar. The music industry, however, was not immediately convinced. When Les Paul first presented the log to the executives at Gibson Guitars, they famously laughed him out of the room, dismissing it as a crude broomstick with pickups. It would take a full decade and the rising success of a competitor, Leo Fender's Esquire model for Gibson, to finally recognize the genius in Les's design. They came back to him, and together they created the Gibson Les Paul, an instrument that would become an undisputed icon. Its rich, warm, sustaining tone became the bedrock of blues, the engine of rock and roll, and the voice of generations of musical rebels. From the searing leads of Jimmy Page to the roar of Slash, that sound is a piece of American innovation you can literally hear. Les Paul's log was more than just a new instrument, it was a catalyst for a cultural earthquake. It democratized music, putting incredible sonic power into the hands of individual performers. It didn't just change the volume of music, it changed its very soul, enabling the visceral, expressive wail that defined rock and roll and gave a soundtrack to rebellion. All because one man looked at a simple block of wood and heard the future. But while Les Paul's invention gave us a new way to make noise, our next innovator was about to give us a new way to make a mess. The story of the Super Soaker doesn't begin in a toy factory or a backyard. It starts in the highly precise, sterile environment of a NASA laboratory. Lonnie Johnson was a brilliant aerospace engineer who had worked on missions like the Galileo probe to Jupiter and the Stealth Bomber program. His mind was constantly working on complex problems, and one day in 1982, he was tinkering in his own home workshop on a project completely unrelated to fun and games. He was attempting to create an innovative heat pump that would use water instead of the Freon that was standard at the time. He had built a prototype, and as he was testing the mechanisms in his bathroom, he aimed the nozzle at the tub, turned it on, and unleashed a shockingly powerful, high-pressure jet of water across the room. In that instant, he saw the potential for something far more playful than a refrigerator component. The genius of Johnson's accidental discovery was the pneumatic system he had engineered. Unlike traditional squirt guns that relied on a simple piston to push out a weak stream of water, his design used an air pump to pressurize a large reservoir. This stored energy could then be released in a single, devastatingly powerful blast that could travel over 50 feet. He knew immediately he had stumbled upon the blueprint for the ultimate water gun. For years, Johnson carried this idea with him, juggling his day job in high-stakes rocketry with evenings and weekends spent refining his water blaster prototype, which he initially called the Power Drencher. The journey from that Eureka, a moment in his bathroom, to the toy store shelf was a long one, filled with the classic struggles of an inventor. He faced rejection from every major toy company until finally, 7 years later, the Larami Corporation saw the potential. They rebranded it the Super Soaker and released it in 1990. The impact was nothing short of a cultural tsunami. The Super Soaker wasn't just a toy, it was an event. It transformed the humble squirt gun from a dribbling novelty into a high-performance piece of hardware. Backyard battles escalated into full-scale water wars, with kids strategizing over capacity, range, and pump speed. The original Super Soaker 50 could drench a target from across the lawn, and later models like the iconic CPS 2000 became the stuff of legend with their back-mounted water tanks and devastating firepower. It completely dominated the market, generating over $1 billion in sales and making Lonnie Johnson one of the most successful toy inventors of all time. Beyond the sheer fun and the epic soakings, Lonnie Johnson's story is profoundly significant. As an African-American inventor in the 1980s, he broke barriers in multiple fields. He held a vast number of patents, not just for toys, but for advanced energy technology, proving that the line between serious science and pure joy is often much thinner than we think. His success with the Super Soaker provided him with the financial freedom to pursue his other passions, leading to advancements in battery technology through his company, Johnson Research and Development. He took the proceeds from a billion-dollar water gun and reinvested them into trying to solve the world's energy problems. From a bathroom laboratory to the outer solar system and back again, Lonnie Johnson's legacy is a powerful reminder that a brilliant mind, coupled with the ability to recognize a happy accident, can change the world in the most unexpectedly wonderful ways. But not every great American idea was born in the heat of battle or a high-tech lab. Some of the most enduring inventions emerged from the quietest, most unassuming moments of sheer chance. Take the case of naval engineer Richard James in 1943. He was hard at work at a shipyard in Philadelphia, developing a new kind of torsion spring. His goal was anything but playful. He was trying to create a sensitive mounting for delicate equipment on naval ships, something that could stabilize crucial machinery even in the roughest seas. As he worked, he accidentally knocked one of his experimental springs from a high shelf. Instead of just clattering to the floor, the spring performed a kind of magic. It gracefully coiled itself down, end over end, in a series of mesmerizing steps. It seemed to almost walk itself down from the shelf and onto a stack of books, and finally to the floor where it came to rest perfectly coiled. In that single, silent moment of observation, the Slinky was born. James was immediately captivated by the motion. He brought the spring home to his wife, Betty, and told her he thought he could make a toy out of it. After some initial skepticism, she agreed, and together they began the long process of turning that accidental fall into a product. The first big hurdle was finding the right steel wire and the perfect tension. The spring had to be flexible enough to walk, but not so loose that it would easily tangle. Richard eventually perfected the formula, and they took out a $500 loan to fund the initial production run. They had 400 Slinkies made by a local machine shop, but the next challenge was even tougher, convincing a store to sell it. No toy buyer would even give them a meeting. In a last-ditch effort, Richard and Betty convinced the Gimbels department store in Philadelphia to let them demonstrate the toy in the toy section during the 1945 Christmas season. Richard set up an inclined plane of wooden boards and released the Slinky. The crowd that gathered was utterly mesmerized, watching the simple piece of metal perform its hypnotic descent. All 400 units sold in just 90 minutes. The Slinky's success was instantaneous and overwhelming, but its journey to becoming a true icon had just begun. Its initial popularity was actually aided by its original material. In the post-war era, metal was still a novelty for toys, and the Slinky's polished steel coils had a sleek, modern appeal. But its real genius was its simplicity. It was a toy of pure physics, a lesson in potential and kinetic energy that a child could hold in their hands. It required no batteries, no instructions, and could provide endless entertainment. A child could watch it walk downstairs for hours or simply fidget with its satisfyingly compact form. It was in every sense a perfect toy, and its cultural reach extended far beyond the playroom. During World War II, the very springs Richard James was working on were actually used in radar equipment aboard ships, making the Slinky one of the few toys with a direct link to the war effort. Later, it went to space with astronauts to demonstrate physics in zero gravity. Of course, the most famous iteration of the Slinky is its legendary television jingle. That simple, unforgettable melody, composed for a commercial in the 1960s, is arguably one of the most effective advertising tunes in history. What walks downstairs alone or in pairs and makes a slinkety sound? It perfectly captured the toy's whimsical, almost magical quality and cemented its place in the collective consciousness of generations. It transformed the Slinky from a popular toy into a permanent fixture of American pop culture. To date, over 300 million Slinkies have been sold, a testament to the enduring power of a simple spring and a curious mind. Richard James's story, however, also has a poignant side. He eventually left the company and his family to join a religious cult in Bolivia, leaving Betty James to take over the business. It was under her leadership that the company truly flourished, introducing the plastic Slinky and the beloved Slinky dog, ensuring that a single moment of accidental inspiration would continue to bring joy to millions. From the quiet, accidental magic of a falling spring, we now turn to a story born from pure, unadulterated pettiness in a 19th century kitchen. It's one of the most delicious tales of American invention, and it all started with a complaint. The year was 1853, and the place was the bustling Moon's Lake House, an upscale resort in the picturesque town of Saratoga Springs, New York. The resort's chef was a man named George Crumb, a man of African and Native American descent known for his excellent, if somewhat fiery, temperament. Crumb was proud of his work, and one evening he prepared an order of his famous French fried potatoes for a particularly fussy patron. Some accounts say it was the wealthy railroad magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt himself. The customer sent the plate back to the kitchen, grumbling that the fries were too thick, too soggy, and not cooked well enough. This did not sit well with Chef Crumb. Annoyed and perhaps a bit insulted, he decided to teach this difficult customer a lesson. In a fit of culinary spite, he sliced a new potato impossibly thin, so papery that it could hardly hold its shape. He then threw the slices into a vat of scalding oil, frying them until they were browned and rigid, a far cry from the soft, pliable fries he usually served. For the final insult, he heavily salted the brittle, translucent wafers before sending them out to the dining room, fully expecting the customer to be enraged. But the reaction was the complete opposite. The patron was absolutely delighted. He loved them. They were crispy, salty, and utterly addictive. Crumb's attempt at a culinary rebuke had backfired spectacularly, giving birth to the Saratoga chip. The new dish quickly became the specialty of the house. Soon, patrons weren't coming to Moon's Lake House for the main course. They were coming for the chips. Crumb himself recognized the unexpected gold mine he had stumbled upon, and soon opened his own restaurant, Crumb's House, where a basket of these potato chips was placed on every table as a free appetizer. Their popularity exploded, but they remained a restaurant delicacy for decades due to the immense challenge of mass production and packaging. How do you package something so delicate without it turning into a bag of crumbs? The breakthrough came in the 1920s with the invention of the automatic potato peeler and, crucially, the airtight wax paper bag. This allowed Laura Scudder, a pioneering businesswoman in California, To develop the ironed bag, her employees would iron wax paper sheets into bags, fill them with chips, and then iron the top shut, creating the first truly fresh, unbroken, mass-market potato chip. This innovation is what launched the chip from a regional restaurant treat into a national snacking obsession. Today, the potato chip industry is a multi-billion-dollar behemoth, a staple in pantries across the globe. But the story of George Crumb is about so much more than a salty snack. It's a story of triumph and irony. Crumb, a man of color working in a 19th century America, took a moment of frustration and, without even meaning to, created an icon. He transformed an insult into an empire. His invention crossed every social and cultural boundary, becoming a snack for everyone. And there's a certain beautiful justice in that. A snack created out of spite ended up bringing people together. Every time you open a bag and hear that crinkle followed by the satisfying crunch, you're experiencing a small piece of that defiant, ingenious spirit. It's a testament to the idea that sometimes the greatest American innovations don't come from a place of peaceful calculation, but from a spark of heated emotion. But for every invention born from a moment of frustration or a flash of culinary spite, there is another that emerges from a simple, loving observation. A decade after the potato chip began its march to global domination, a different kind of American icon was taking shape, one that would not fill stomachs but ignite imaginations. This story begins not in a restaurant kitchen but in a living room with a mother watching her young daughter play. Her name was Ruth Handler, and she was the co-founder alongside her husband Elliot of a small but ambitious toy company called Mattel. As she watched her daughter, Barbara, and her friends engage in imaginative play with paper dolls, she noticed something profound. The little girls weren't just dressing the dolls, they were projecting themselves into the future. They were acting out stories of teenage and adult life, giving the flat paper figures roles as college students, cheerleaders, and career women. Yet the three-dimensional dolls available at the time were almost exclusively infant dolls, designed to nurture a child's maternal instincts. There was nothing on the market that allowed a young girl to dream about what she herself might become. Ruth Handler saw this gap not as a minor oversight, but as a monumental opportunity. During a family trip to Europe in 1956, she discovered a doll in a Swiss shop window that would crystallize her vision. It was called the Build Lily doll, a German novelty toy based on a comic strip character. Lily was a working woman, a bit sassy and glamorous with an elaborate adult wardrobe. She wasn't a child's toy, but Ruth immediately saw the potential. She brought several Lily dolls back to America and began the arduous process of creating an American version, one designed specifically for children. She named the project after her daughter, Barbara, Barbie. The journey from that European inspiration to the toy store shelf was a battle against intense skepticism. Her own husband and his business partners at Mattel were vehemently opposed. They argued that no mother would ever buy a doll with a woman's figure for her little girl. Market researchers echoed this sentiment, insisting the doll was too mature and that it would be a commercial failure, but Ruth Handler was unwavering. She believed so deeply in her idea that she pushed the project forward against all advice, pouring the company's resources into its development. When Barbie made her dazzling debut at the American International Toy Fair in New York on March 9, 1959, she was a revolution. Dressed in a sleek black and white zebra-striped swimsuit, her hair in a perfect ponytail, she was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. She was a teenager, a young woman with her own identity, her own aspirations, and her own impossibly glamorous life. The toy buyers, almost exclusively men at the time, were baffled, but the little girls who saw her, they were captivated. Barbie was an instant runaway success. Mattel sold over 300,000 dolls in the first year alone, and within a decade, Barbie was not just a toy but a phenomenon. She wasn't a baby you cared for, she was a persona you could step into. She could be a nurse, an astronaut, a pilot, a presidential candidate. Her careers expanded with the times, offering generations of girls a tangible, three-dimensional prompt to envision a future without limits. Of course, with such staggering success and cultural penetration came intense scrutiny and controversy. Almost from the beginning, Barbie became a lightning rod in debates about body image and unrealistic beauty standards. Critics argued that her proportions, if scaled up to human size, were anatomically impossible, promoting an unattainable and potentially harmful ideal. She was dissected by feminists and academics as a symbol of oppressive consumerism and passive femininity. Yet, simultaneously, she was also celebrated as a feminist icon. Long before women were common in these fields, Barbie was an astronaut, landing on the moon in 1965, 4 years before Neil Armstrong. She ran for president in 1992. She was a surgeon, a computer engineer, and a diplomat. Mattel, often in response to criticism, continually evolved the brand, eventually introducing dolls with a far more diverse range of body types, skin tones, and careers. This duality is the very essence of Barbie's legacy. She is a mirror, reflecting our own complex and often contradictory attitudes toward womanhood, ambition, and beauty. For every critic who saw a problematic icon, there was a child who saw infinite possibility. She was a blank slate upon which millions of girls projected their own dreams and stories. Ruth Handler's vision, born from watching her daughter play, ultimately created one of the most successful and impactful toys in history, with over 1 billion dolls sold. Barbie is more than plastic and paint. She is a cultural Rorschach test, a controversial, beloved, and endlessly fascinating testament to the power of play to shape, challenge, and reflect our understanding of ourselves. And from a doll's dream house, we arrive at perhaps the most monumental American invention of them all, one that would eventually build a digital house for all of humanity. While Barbie was inspiring girls to imagine their future careers in a sterile government laboratory, a very different kind of future was being quietly assembled, one packet of data at a time. The story of the internet doesn't begin with a Eureka, a moment in a garage, or a flash of spite in a kitchen. It begins in the shadow of nuclear annihilation. The year was 1969, at the height of the Cold War, and the Advanced Research Projects Agency, or ARPA, a branch of the U.S. Department of Defense, was grappling with a terrifying strategic vulnerability. The nation's communication network was centralized, built around crucial hub locations like Washington, D.C. A single, well-placed nuclear strike could decapitate the entire American command structure, severing lines of communication between military installations, research universities, and government agencies at the very moment they were needed most. The proposed solution was as radical as the problem was dire. Instead of a centralized hub-and-spoke system, a team of visionary computer scientists, including figures like J.C.R. Licklider and Robert Taylor, envisioned a decentralized network, a web of interconnected nodes with no single point of failure. In this system, dubbed ARPANET, data would not travel along a single, predetermined path. It would be broken down into smaller chunks called packets. Each packet could independently find its way across the network, navigating around any damage or congestion, and then be reassembled into the original message at its destination. This concept, known as packet switching, was the foundational genius of the entire system. On October 29, 1969, that theory became reality. Charlie Klein, a student at the University of California, Los Angeles, sat down at an SDS Sigma 7 computer and attempted to send a message to a similar machine at the Stanford Research Institute, over 300 miles away. The plan was to transmit the login command, login. The system crashed after the first 2 letters, so the first message ever sent over the ARPANET was, fittingly, low. It was a humble, glitchy beginning for what would become the nervous system of the modern world. For its first decade, ARPANET remained a tool for a small, elite group of academics and military researchers. It was a text-only world of green screens and complex commands, used primarily for sending emails and sharing computing resources. The true metamorphosis, the moment it burst from its military academic cocoon, came with the development of a universal language, a protocol that would allow all these disparate networks to talk to one another. In 1983, ARPANET officially adopted the Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol, or TCP/IP, suite, largely designed by American computer scientists Robert Kahn and Vinton Cerf. This was the Internet's real Big Bang. TCP/IP provided the common rules that allowed any network anywhere to connect to any other, creating a network of networks. This is the very definition of the Internet. It was no longer just ARPANET, it was the Internet, but it was still a mostly textual, command-line universe, inaccessible to the average person. The final, crucial piece of the puzzle, the invention that would democratize the digital world, arrived in 1991. A British computer scientist named Tim Berners-Lee, working at CERN in Switzerland, created the World Wide Web. While often conflated with the Internet itself, the web is actually an application that runs on the Internet. It's the layer consisting of websites, hyperlinks, and browsers that we interact with. Yet, its adoption was supercharged by an American creation. In 1993, a team at the University of Illinois National Center for Supercomputing Applications, led by Mark Andreessen, released Mosaic, the first graphical web browser that was easy for anyone to install and use. It displayed text and images together on the same page, and it was free. Mosaic and its commercial successor Netscape Navigator lit the fuse. Suddenly, the abstract complexity of the Internet had a friendly visual face. Everyone could now surf the web. The societal impact of this American-born invention is almost impossible to overstate. It has reshaped every single facet of human existence, how we communicate, learn, work, shop, love, and govern ourselves. It dismantled geographic barriers, creating a global village while also fostering polarized echo chambers. It birthed entirely new economies and decimated old ones. It gave a voice to the voiceless and a platform for both profound enlightenment and dangerous misinformation. It is the Library of Alexandria, the town square, the marketplace, and the entertainmentplex, all contained in a device in our pocket. From the lofty goal of surviving nuclear war to the humble reality of sharing a cat video, the Internet's journey is the ultimate story of unintended consequences. A defense project designed for utmost secrecy and resilience, ironically evolved into history's most powerful engine for openness, connection, and transparent information sharing, for better and for worse. It stands as America's most profound export to the world, a digital manifestation of both its ambitious ingenuity and its complex, chaotic spirit. Yet for every monumental network designed to connect continents, there is a far more humble, yet equally revolutionary, invention designed to connect two simple pieces of fabric. It's a device so perfectly integrated into our daily lives that we scarcely give it a second thought. Yet its journey from a laughingstock to a global necessity is a classic tale of American perseverance. Decades before the Internet's first digital low, a mechanical zip was struggling to be heard. Our story begins in 1893 at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, a grand World's Fair celebrating human progress. It was here that a man named Whitcomb Judson, an inventor from Chicago, premiered his novel creation, the clasp locker. Judson's device was not intended for the world of high fashion. It was a practical solution to a common annoyance. His friend had a bad back and found the tedious act of buttoning his high boots every morning to be pure agony. Judson's invention aimed to solve this with a sliding fastener that could quickly join and separate a series of hooks and eyes. The public debut was a disaster. The clasp locker was complex, expensive, and notoriously unreliable. It was a finicky contraption of hooks and eyes that would frequently jam, rust, or burst open at the most inopportune moments. The fairgoers, expecting marvels, were instead presented with a gadget that seemed more trouble than it was worth. Judson and his business partner, Lewis Walker, struggled for years to refine it and find a market, but the clasp locker remained a commercial failure. It seemed destined to be a footnote in the history of forgotten gadgets. The true savior of the sliding fastener arrived in the form of a Swedish-American electrical engineer named Gideon Sundback. Hired by Judson's company, which had been reorganized as the Universal Fastener Company, Sundback took on the challenge with a fresh perspective. His Eureka, a moment was sparked by personal tragedy. After the death of his wife, he reportedly threw himself into his work as a form of solace. In 1913, he emerged with a design that was radically different and elegantly simple. He did away with the clumsy hooks and eyes entirely. Sundback's breakthrough was a system based on interlocking metallic teeth. He designed a Y-shaped channel that could be meshed together or pulled apart with a sliding tab, which he called the separable fastener. He also developed the manufacturing machine to produce this new fastener with stunning precision. This wasn't just an improvement, it was a complete reinvention. The new design was stronger, more reliable, and far smoother in its operation. The U.S. military, always in search of efficient innovations, became one of the first major adopters. During World War I, they ordered tens of thousands of Sundback's fasteners for money belts and flying suits for the nascent Navy pilots, putting the invention to the ultimate test of durability and function under pressure. It passed with flying colors, but the invention still lacked a name and, more crucially, a public identity. That final piece of the puzzle fell into place in the 1920s thanks to the B.F. Goodrich Company. They decided to use Sundback's fastener on a new line of rubber galoshes, and during a product demonstration, a company executive famously slid the fastener up and down, declaring, "It zips." The onomatopoeic name was a marketing masterstroke. The zipper boot was a hit, and the name stuck to the fastener itself. The final conquest of the zipper came from an unlikely source, the world of French fashion. For years, zippers were seen as utilitarian hardware, fit for boots and workwear, but far too crude for high society. That all changed in 1937 when a daring fashion designer featured zippers on men's trousers, promoting them as a more secure and modern alternative to the traditional button fly. The trend took off, and the zipper's journey from practical joke to everyday essential was finally complete. Today, the zipper is utterly inescapable. It is a masterpiece of functional design, a symbol of efficiency that holds our world together, from the jeans we wear to the tents we camp in, from the cushions on our sofas to the suits astronauts wear in the vacuum of space. Its evolution from Judson's flawed clasp locker to Sundback's elegant solution is a powerful lesson in innovation. It shows that a brilliant initial idea often isn't enough. It requires relentless refinement, a willingness to scrap the original concept and start anew, and sometimes just the perfect name to make the world finally understand what it's been missing all along. While the zipper was finding its place in the fabric of daily life, another American inventor was grappling with a problem of a far more urgent and public nature: the chaotic, deadly dance of automobiles, pedestrians, and horse-drawn carriages competing for space in the rapidly growing cities of the early 20th century. The first electric traffic signals, installed in Cleveland, Ohio in 1914, were a step forward, but they were dangerously simplistic. They featured only two commands: stop and go. This abrupt binary system offered no transition, no warning. Drivers would see a green light and proceed, only to be T-boned by cross traffic that had already entered the intersection on their own green light. The system was so perilous that it often required a police officer to manually operate it, putting human lives at risk simply to manage the machine. Into this dangerous fray stepped Garrett Morgan, a prolific African-American inventor and entrepreneur from Cleveland. Morgan was a remarkable figure, the son of formerly enslaved parents, who had already found success with inventions like a chemical hair straightening cream and a patented improved sewing machine. But his most crucial innovation was born from first-hand experience. After witnessing a particularly horrific collision between a car and a horse-drawn carriage at a problematic intersection, Morgan was moved to action. He knew there had to be a safer way. In 1923, he patented a new kind of traffic signal, a T-shaped pole unit that introduced a revolutionary third position, a caution or all-direction stop signal. Morgan's design was mechanical and brilliantly intuitive. It had 3 positions, stop, go, and a third arm that would swing into place, warning all drivers to stop in all directions before the opposing traffic was given the signal to go. This interval created a vital buffer, allowing vehicles to clear the intersection safely. Crucially, Morgan's signal also included the precursor to the modern yield or yellow light concept, providing that critical moment of warning for everyone. To secure the patent, he had to overcome significant racial barriers. He initially hired a white actor to pose as the inventor during presentations to potential buyers, as he knew his own race would be a major obstacle to gaining a fair hearing for his life-saving idea. The true value of his invention was proven in a dramatic fashion. Morgan personally demonstrated its effectiveness by having a teenage boy operate the signal while he explained its mechanics to officials. The city of Cleveland saw the dramatic decrease in accidents at test intersections and quickly adopted the device. The big breakthrough came when the corporate giant General Electric took notice. They purchased the patent rights from Morgan for the substantial sum of $40,000, a fortune at the time, and began refining his 3-position concept into the modern electric traffic light with the familiar red, yellow, and green lenses we know today. While Morgan's specific mechanical design was eventually phased out, his foundational idea of the caution interval became the universal standard, saving countless millions of lives around the world. Garrett Morgan's story is one of profound ingenuity in the face of immense social adversity. He was a visionary who looked at urban chaos and saw a pattern that could be fixed. His traffic signal did more than just regulate cars. It introduced the very language of modern traffic safety, the idea of a structured pause that prevents tragedy. Beyond this, he was also a hero in the literal sense. Just 2 years after patenting his traffic signal, he made headlines for personally using his own invention, a safety hood, a precursor to the gas mask, to rescue workers trapped in a tunnel explosion under Lake Erie, leading many cities to subsequently adopt his breathing device for their fire departments. His legacy is a powerful reminder that the most impactful innovations are often those that create order from chaos and safety from danger, all born from a simple desire to prevent the pain he witnessed on a Cleveland street. Yet even as Garrett Morgan brought order to our chaotic streets, another American innovator was about to create a very different kind of beautiful chaos, or one that would unfold not on a city intersection, but in a country kitchen, and would result in a revolution of pure, unadulterated sweetness. The year was 1938, and Ruth Graves Wakefield was a woman of many talents, a dietitian, a lecturer, and together with her husband Kenneth, the owner of a popular tourist lodge called the Toll House Inn in the town of Whitman, Massachusetts. Ruth was a stickler for quality, and she took immense pride in the meals and desserts served at her establishment. She was known for a particular dessert called the Butter Drop Dew Cookie, a rich, buttery treat that called for melted baker's chocolate. On one fateful day, as she was preparing a batch for her guests, Ruth discovered she was out of her usual ingredient. Faced with this culinary dilemma, she had a choice: abandon the baking project or improvise. She happened to have a bar of semi-sweet chocolate on hand, a gift from Andrew Nestlé of the Nestlé Company. The common thinking at the time was that any chocolate, when subjected to the heat of an oven, would simply melt and disperse evenly throughout the batter, creating a uniform chocolate cookie. So Ruth took an ice pick and chopped the bar into small, pea-sized bits, expecting them to blend into the dough. But when she pulled the tray from the oven, she was met with a surprise. The chocolate had not melted away. Instead, it had retained its shape, softening into delightful, creamy pockets amidst the golden brown cookie. The accidental creation was an instant hit with her guests, who clamored for more of these cookies with the mysterious chocolate chunks. Ruth's ingenuity didn't stop at the happy accident. She immediately recognized she had created something special and added the new recipe, which she called the Toll House Crunch Cookie, to her menu. Its popularity exploded, soon earning a featured spot in a Boston newspaper food column, which sent its fame rippling across New England and then the entire country. The demand for that specific semi-sweet chocolate bar skyrocketed, a fact that did not go unnoticed by the Nestlé company. They saw their sales climbing and knew exactly why. In a moment of marketing genius, Andrew Nestlé himself approached Ruth Wakefield with a proposition. He offered to buy the rights to her recipe and print it directly on the wrapper of their semi-sweet chocolate bars. In return, Ruth received a lifetime supply of Nestlé chocolate. It was a handshake deal that would change the landscape of American baking forever. The introduction of pre-scored Nestlé semi-sweet morsels in 1941 was the final masterstroke. This eliminated the need for home bakers to wield an ice pick, making the process of creating these cookies incredibly simple and accessible to everyone. The recipe on the back of the yellow bag became a sacred text in American households, passed down through generations. The Toll House cookie became more than a recipe. It became a ritual, a symbol of home, comfort, and shared joy. It is the smell of childhood, the taste of celebration, and the "go on, I'll have just one more" treat that has defined bake sales, holiday parties, and after-school snacks for nearly a century. Ruth Wakefield's story is the ultimate testament to the power of serendipity meeting a prepared, brilliant mind. She didn't see a failed batch of cookies, she saw a new possibility. She took a simple mistake and with a keen business sense turned it into an enduring icon, proving that sometimes the most revolutionary ideas are the ones you never meant to have in the first place. But while Ruth Wakefield's accidental chocolate chips were delighting taste buds, another American was on the verge of harnessing a different kind of energy, one of pure, concentrated light. The story of the laser is a fascinating tale of theoretical prophecy meeting practical, garage-style ingenuity. The concept itself was born from the mind of Albert Einstein, who, back in 1917, laid the theoretical groundwork with his paper on stimulated emission. He proposed that atoms, when excited by energy, could be prompted to emit photons of light in a perfectly synchronized, coherent manner. But for decades, this remained just that, a brilliant theory, a ghost of an idea waiting for someone to give it physical form. The race to build the first working device, which was initially called an optical maser, became a fierce international competition among some of the biggest names in physics at prestigious institutions like Bell Labs and Columbia University. Into this high-stakes academic arena stepped a relatively unknown engineer named Theodore Harold Maiman. Working at the Hughes Research Laboratory in Malibu, California, Maiman was an outsider. He didn't have the pedigree or the extensive funding of his competitors, but what he did have was a profoundly practical, problem-solving mindset and a willingness to challenge the established consensus. At the time, the scientific community was overwhelmingly focused on using a gas as the medium for this new device. They were complex, expensive setups involving elaborate systems of mirrors and tubes. Maiman, however, had a different hunch. He believed a solid-state approach using a synthetic ruby crystal would be simpler and more effective. When he floated this idea, he was met with widespread skepticism, even dismissal. The prevailing opinion was that ruby couldn't possibly work, its energy structure was all wrong. But Maiman, trusting his own calculations and instincts, decided to prove them wrong. With a tiny budget and a small team, he essentially built the world's first laser on a shoestring. His design was breathtakingly elegant in its simplicity. He took a finger-sized ruby cylinder, coated its ends with silver to create mirrors, and wrapped it tightly in a photographer's flash lamp, which would serve as the powerful energy pump. On May 16, 1960, he activated his device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a sudden, brilliant flash of deep red light erupted from the crystal, a beam of light so pure and coherent that it was unlike anything ever created. Mayman had done it. He had built the first working laser. The scientific establishment was stunned. A physics journal even initially rejected his paper announcing the discovery, as it so thoroughly upended their expectations. But the evidence was undeniable. He had taken Einstein's theory and made it tangible. The true genius of Mayman's invention, however, lies not in its creation, but in its seemingly infinite applications. In the early days, it was famously called a solution looking for a problem. Critics couldn't see past its novelty, quipping that it was just an expensive way to burn holes in razor blades. How wrong they were. The laser's unique properties, its monochromatic coherence, its ability to be focused into an incredibly tiny, powerful spot, made it the ultimate precision tool. It revolutionized surgery, allowing for bloodless incisions and delicate eye operations like LASIK that restore vision. It gave us the universal product code, the barcode scanner that silently powers our entire global inventory and retail system. It reads our CDs and DVDs, carries our internet data through fiber optic cables, and guides construction equipment with millimeter accuracy. It measures the distance to the moon and plays with our cats in the living room. From the most profound scientific instruments to the most mundane consumer gadgets, the laser's integration into modern life is absolutely total. Theodore Mayman's story is a powerful lesson in challenging the status quo. He wasn't the first to the idea, but he was the first to find the most direct, practical path to making it real. He saw a possibility where others saw a dead end, and in doing so, he gave us one of the most versatile and transformative inventions of the 20th century, a beam of light that continues to shape our world in ways he could have scarcely imagined. While the laser offered a beam of pure focus, another American innovation of the same era was creating an entirely new kind of space designed for a different kind of focus: shopping. This story begins not with a flash of light, but with a feeling of nostalgia and a profound sense of loss. Victor Grun was an Austrian-born architect who had fled the Nazis and found a new home in the United States. But he was deeply troubled by what he saw in his adopted country, particularly in the burgeoning suburbs. He witnessed the rise of a landscape dominated by strip malls, endless parking lots, and a scattered, car-dependent existence that he felt eroded community and civic life. He remembered the vibrant, pedestrian-friendly town squares and arcades of his European youth, places where people didn't just shop, but also met their neighbors, socialized, and participated in the life of the city. He saw the American suburb as isolating and soulless, and he had a radical vision to fix it. His grand idea was to bring that European town square indoors. He didn't set out to create a temple to consumerism. He aimed to build a new heart for the community, a civic center for the suburbs. His masterpiece, the commission that would change the American landscape forever, was Southdale Center in Edina, Minnesota, which opened its doors in 1956. Southdale was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Grun had essentially built a small, idealized city under one giant, climate-controlled roof. It was the world's first fully enclosed, weather-proofed shopping mall. The design was revolutionary. Two anchor department stores, Dayton's and Donaldson's, were positioned at opposite ends of a two-level, air-conditioned promenade, creating a natural flow of foot traffic between them. But the true stroke of genius was the central court, dubbed the Garden Court. This wasn't just an empty space, it was a bustling town square. It featured a magnificent, cage-free aviary with exotic birds, a goldfish pond, a colossal central sculpture by artist Harry Bertoia, and even a cafe where people could sit and relax. There were no elements of the harsh Minnesota weather inside, no snow, no bitter cold, no summer heat. It was perpetual spring. Groon had populated the mall with a host of non-retail amenities to encourage lingering and community interaction. A community room, an auditorium, a post office, and even a school. His vision was that the mall would become the central gathering place for suburban families, a utopian main street where commerce was just one part of a rich tapestry of daily life. The public response was euphoric. On opening day, crowds flocked to experience this marvel, with people reportedly changing into their Sunday best just to go shopping. It was an instant smashing success. Southdale sparked a retail revolution. Developers across the nation saw its profitability and rushed to replicate the enclosed mall formula. The concept spread like wildfire, becoming the undisputed blueprint for suburban development for the next 4 decades. Malls became the new social hubs for teenagers, the preferred shopping destination for families, and powerful economic engines for their regions. However, in their rush to capitalize on the model, developers embraced only half of Groon's vision. They built the commercial shell, the department stores and the retail shops, but they systematically stripped away all the civic elements Groon held dear. The community rooms, auditoriums, and public art were deemed unprofitable and were left out of subsequent designs. The mall was no longer a town center, it was purely a retail machine. Victor Groon watched the perversion of his dream with growing horror and bitterness. He had envisioned his malls as walkable cores that would ultimately be surrounded by dense, mixed-use development, apartments, schools, medical offices, all within walking distance, reducing reliance on the car. Instead, his invention had the opposite effect. Malls became massive magnets that generated even more traffic, surrounded by vast oceans of parking that further entrenched car culture. By the 1970s, he had become one of his own creation's most vocal critics. He famously disowned the shopping mall, lamenting that he refused to pay alimony to those bastard developments. He felt that developers had perverted his ideas, junked his ideals, and created monolithic, isolating structures that exacerbated the very problems of suburban sprawl he had sought to solve. The legacy of Victor Groon is one of profound irony. He is the father of a building type that came to define late 20th century American consumerism, yet his personal ambition was profoundly anti-consumerist. He gave the world a format that would dominate retail for generations, but he died feeling that his true vision, a vision of community, connection, and civic life, had been utterly betrayed. The story of the mall is a cautionary tale about the gap between an inventor's intention and the world's interpretation, a reminder that even the most idealistic blueprints can be redrawn by the forces of commerce. And while Victor Groon was reimagining the communal spaces we share, another innovator was focused on revolutionizing the most personal space of all, the bed. After the immense industrial effort of World War II, American factories were retooling for domestic life, and a wave of new consumer appliances promised to make home life more comfortable and convenient. For those living in colder climates, however, the bedroom remained a frontier of discomfort. Climbing into a frigid bed on a winter night was a universally dreaded experience, often solved with heavy, burdensome piles of quilts or the dangerous practice of heating a brick by the fire and wrapping it in a towel. The quest for a safer, more modern solution would lead to a product that literally brought warmth into the American bedroom, the automatic electric blanket. The idea of using electricity for bed warmth wasn't entirely new. The first crude and frankly hazardous heated bed covers appeared as early as the 1910s. These initial designs were essentially large sheets of fabric with embedded wires, lacking any real safety features or consistent temperature control. They were notorious for overheating, causing burns, and were significant fire risks. The true breakthrough, the one that transformed a dangerous novelty into a trusted household staple, came from an inventor named George Crowley. Working in the post-war environment of 1946, Crowley understood that the key wasn't just generating heat, but controlling it intelligently and safely. His pivotal innovation was the integration of a reliable, automatic thermostat directly into the blanket's design. Crowley's system was elegantly simple. The thermostat was designed to constantly monitor the blanket's temperature. Once the fabric reached a preset, safe level of warmth, the thermostat would automatically cut the electrical current, preventing any dangerous overheating. When the temperature dipped below that threshold, it would click back on to gently re-warm the bedding. This closed-loop system made the blanket not only safe for overnight use, but also incredibly efficient, using only the minimal amount of electricity needed to maintain a cozy temperature. This automatic regulation was the magic ingredient that allowed the electric blanket to transition from a risky gadget to a must-have comfort item, especially in the chillier northern states and drafty older homes. The societal impact of this simple invention was profound. It democratized personal comfort, offering an affordable and efficient way to stay warm without having to heat an entire home through the night. This was particularly valuable during the energy crises of the 1970s, when turning down the thermostat at night became a national imperative. The electric blanket allowed families to save on soaring heating bills without sacrificing a good night's sleep. It also became a tool of therapeutic relief, providing soothing warmth for those with arthritis, muscle pain, or poor circulation. The evolution of the technology didn't stop with Crowley's basic design. Subsequent decades saw the introduction of dual zone controls, allowing each side of the bed to have its own personalized temperature, setting a marital peacekeeping innovation of its own. The technology eventually shrank and evolved into the ultra-convenient heated throw, a portable source of instant comfort for the couch, and the heated mattress pad, which warms the bed from beneath for a more enveloping, radiant heat. From George Crowley's simple, life-saving thermostat sprang an entire category of personal heating products that continue to offer warmth and comfort to millions. It stands as a perfect example of a quieter, humbler form of American ingenuity, one that may not have reshaped cities or created a new art form, but instead focused on solving a small, universal human problem with elegance, safety, and remarkable effectiveness. It's the kind of invention that makes you wonder how people ever managed without it, a silent guardian against the cold that continues to make those dark winter nights just a little bit more welcoming. Yet for every blanket that offered warmth, there was a far more frequent and far messier problem plaguing households across the nation, one that fell squarely on the shoulders of new parents. In the years following World War II, the American baby boom was in full swing, and with it came a domestic chore of monumental proportions, the endless, relentless cycle of washing cloth diapers. For centuries, the routine was grueling and universal. Soiled cotton diapers had to be rinsed, scrubbed, boiled in large pots on the stove to sanitize them, and then hung out on lines to dry, a process that consumed hours of labor each week and left homes perpetually smelling of dampness and bleach. It was a problem everyone just accepted as an inevitable part of parenthood, a soggy, unpleasant fact of life. But one new mother looked at this exhausting ritual and saw not an inevitability, but a challenge waiting for a brilliant solution. Her name was Marian Donovan, and she was about to change parenting forever from the comfort of her own Connecticut kitchen. Marian was no stranger to invention. She was the daughter of an inventor who ran a manufacturing plant and had grown up tinkering with tools and machinery. Now a mother of two with a third on the way, she found herself drowning in the sheer drudgery of the diaper pail. The constant leaks and resulting changes of bedding and clothing meant her laundry load was not just unpleasant, it was utterly overwhelming. Driven by sheer necessity and a powerful desire to protect her infant daughter's delicate skin from constant dampness, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Her Eureka moment came not in a laboratory but at her local hardware store. she purchased a plain white plastic shower curtain, brought it home, and laid it out on her kitchen table. With a pair of sewing shears and her own sewing machine, she began to experiment. Her goal was simple yet revolutionary: to create a waterproof barrier that could prevent leaks but would still be comfortable for a baby to wear. She cut and stitched the shower curtain into a pair of diaper covers, fashioning them with a clever design that used snap fasteners instead of the dangerous safety pins of the era. But her true stroke of genius was the material itself. While others had tried and failed with rubberized or laminated fabrics that were stiff, clammy, and caused painful diaper rash, Marion's plastic shower curtain was soft, quiet, and most importantly, breathable. It kept moisture in without trapping air and heat against the baby's skin. She called her creation the boater because it helped babies stay afloat and avoid getting wet. She tested the prototype on her own daughter, and to her delight, it worked perfectly. The bedding stayed dry, the baby was happier, and Marion's laundry load was dramatically reduced. Buoyed by her success, she took her invention to the executives at every major department store in New York City. The male buyers, skeptical of a product invented by a woman for a domestic problem they had never personally experienced, initially turned her away. But Marion was undeterred. She finally secured a meeting at Saks Fifth Avenue, and in a brilliant demonstration of her belief in the product, she diapered a doll with one of her boaters and poured water into it right there on the buyer's expensive mahogany desk. The water beaded up inside the cover, and the desk remained perfectly dry. The stunned executive immediately placed an order. The boater was an instant hit with mothers, selling out quickly and proving there was a massive, untapped market for convenience in baby care. Marion Donovan patented her design in 1951 and soon sold the rights to the company Kiko Corporation for $1 million. But her visionary mind was already looking toward the next logical step. If you could create a waterproof cover, why not eliminate the cloth diaper altogether? She began developing a prototype for a fully disposable diaper using a special absorbent paper. But when she presented this concept to the large manufacturing corporations, they laughed her out of the room. They dismissed the idea as superfluous and absurdly expensive, a solution in search of a problem. It would take another decade and the involvement of a Procter & Gamble engineer named Vic Mills, who, frustrated with changing his own grandchild's cloth diapers, saw the immense potential in Marion's idea for her vision to be fully realized. Mills's team at P&G refined the concept, and in 1961 they launched Pampers, the world's first mass-produced disposable diaper. The impact of this innovation on society cannot be overstated. It liberated parents, especially mothers, from a crushing and time-consuming domestic burden, giving them back precious hours each week and fundamentally altering the experience of early childcare. It played a significant role in enabling more women to enter and remain in the workforce, as the logistical nightmare of constant laundry was removed from the equation. It also contributed to a dramatic improvement in infant health, reducing the incidence of severe diaper rash and associated skin infections. Today, the disposable diaper industry is a global powerhouse, but its origin story remains a powerful testament to one woman's refusal to accept that that's just the way it is. Marion Donovan looked at a problem everyone else took for granted, applied her own ingenuity, and in doing so, she didn't just invent a product, she helped launch a social revolution from her kitchen table. Meanwhile, on the sun-bleached concrete of Southern California, an entirely different form of locomotion was taking shape, born not from the mind of a single inventor, but from the collective restlessness of an entire subculture. The 1950s were the golden age of surfing, with a whole generation of youths completely captivated by the feeling of carving a line across the face of a moving wave. But the Pacific Ocean is fickle. There were always flat days, days when the swell vanished and the sea became a placid, unrideable pane of glass, leaving these surfers with an itch they couldn't scratch, a deep craving for that unique sensation of speed and flow. Their solution was as brilliantly simple as it was inevitable. If you can't surf the water, surf the land. This was the true birth of the skateboard, a creation of pure necessity and improvisation. There was no grand design, no corporate R&D department. It was a grassroots, do-it-yourself revolution that started in the garages and driveways of coastal towns like Santa Monica and Dana Point. The earliest models were literally just that, 2x4s or wooden planks, often pilfered from crates or old furniture, with a set of metal roller skate wheels nailed or bolted directly to the bottom. These contraptions were incredibly crude, often referred to as sidewalk surfboards or push scooters without the handle. The trucks, the essential T-shaped axle assemblies that allow for turning, didn't exist yet. Steering was a matter of awkwardly leaning or even kicking the tail around, and the clay or steel wheels offered a ride that was jarringly rough and notoriously prone to catching on the smallest pebble, sending the rider flying in a wheel bite incident. But none of that mattered, because the moment a surfer pushed off and found they could replicate that low, carving stance, weaving down a paved hill as if it were a watery slope, a new addiction was born. They began mimicking surfing maneuvers on asphalt, calling it sidewalk surfing. Early pioneers like Bill Richards and his son Mark are often credited with taking the hobby to the next level. In 1958, Mark convinced the Chicago Roller Skate Company to sell him a set of skate wheels separately from the boot, which he then attached to a square-ended board. This partnership led to the first commercially produced skateboards, sold by the Val Surf Shop in Hollywood, but they were still primitive and seen as little more than passing fads or toys. The true turning point, the moment skateboarding evolved from a casual hobby into a bona fide sport with its own identity, arrived in the early 1970s with two seismic innovations. The first was purely technical. A man named Frank Nasworthy stumbled upon a new type of wheel made from a material called polyurethane while visiting a friend's manufacturing plant in Virginia. He brought a set back to California, attached them to a board, and was utterly amazed. Unlike the clacky, unforgiving metal and clay wheels, these new urethane wheels were quiet, incredibly grippy, and so smooth they seemed to glide over asphalt and imperfections. They provided a level of control and speed previously unimaginable. Nasworthy started the Cadillac Wheels Company, and almost overnight his product transformed the entire experience. Now skaters could go faster, turn sharper, and ride more terrain safely, which directly led to the second revolution, the discovery of empty swimming pools. A severe drought hit California in the mid-70s, leaving thousands of backyard swimming pools empty. Skateboarders, with their new urethane-wheeled magic carpets, looked at these smooth, curved basins not as a sign of ecological crisis, but as a skate park delivered by fate. They would trespass into backyards, drain the leftover puddles, and become the first pool riders. This was the big bang for modern skateboarding. The curved walls of the pool allowed riders to generate immense speed and launch into the air, mimicking the arc of a wave. It was in these drained concrete shells that the foundational tricks of vertical skating were invented. Aerials, handplants, and the iconic ollie, a move pioneered by Alan Ollie Gelfand in a Florida skate park that would become the essential building block for almost every modern trick. This era birthed the first true skate stars, the Z-Boys of the Dogtown crew in Venice, California, who approached empty pools with a ferocious, low-to-the-ground style borrowed from their surfing heroes, making skateboarding look less like a toy and more like an art form of rebellion and athleticism. The cultural explosion was inevitable. Skateboarding magazines documented the mayhem, and competitions began drawing crowds, but the industry was still a niche, boom and bust cycle, vulnerable to public perception and safety panics. Its true catapult into the global mainstream, making it unavoidable for an entire generation, came from two places. First, the proliferation of dedicated, concrete skate parks in the late 70s and early 80s offered a legal and permanent home for the culture to thrive. And second, the rise of a singular, iconic figure who would become the face of the sport for decades to come, Tony Hawk. Hawk was a skinny, hyper-competitive kid who turned pro at just 14 years old and quickly dominated contests with an unheard of technical precision and a seemingly endless bag of new tricks. His name became synonymous with progression, but his true lasting impact on skateboarding's reach came from an unlikely source: the world of video games. In 1999, the Activision game Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was released on the original PlayStation. It was a revelation. The game perfectly captured the feeling of freedom, creativity, and rebellious cool of skate culture. It wasn't just a game, it was a digital portal into the sport. Millions of kids who had never stood on a board, living in towns with no skate parks, could now learn the names of pros, understand the intricacies of tricks, and absorb the punk and hip-hop soundtrack that defined the scene. It was the single greatest marketing tool skateboarding could have ever asked for, sparking a global participation boom that flooded skate shops with new customers and cemented skateboarding's place not just as a sport, but as a pillar of youth culture worldwide. Today, skateboarding is a billion-dollar industry with its own fashion lines, music, and art. It's an Olympic sport, a far cry from its rebellious, backyard trespassing origins. Yet, at its heart, it has never lost its essential, beautiful DIY spirit. It remains a sport accessible to anyone with a board and a stretch of pavement, a culture built on self-expression and relentless perseverance. Every skater knows the mantra, you will fall. You will fall 100, 1,000 times learning a new trick, but you have to get back up. That resilience, that willingness to embrace failure as a necessary step toward mastery, is skateboarding's greatest gift to the millions who have ever pushed off and felt that first exhilarating rush of rolling freedom. It is a testament to what can happen when a simple solution to boredom, nailing wheels to a plank, is fueled by passion and creativity into a global force that continues to shape music, art, fashion, and the very definition of cool. And from the rebellious concrete of skate parks, we pivot to a much sweeter and surprisingly more enduring American icon born not from youthful rebellion but from pragmatic thrift in a commercial bakery. The year was 1930, the heart of the Great Depression, and a man named James Dew was managing the Continental Baking Company's Chicago plant. His operation was famous for its fresh strawberry shortcakes, a seasonal treat that flew off the shelves during the summer months. But this very popularity presented a major business problem. The shortcake pans, the specially designed baking trays used to create the distinct sponge cakes, sat completely idle and unproductive for the rest of the year. Dew, a practical and cost-conscious manager, saw this as a tremendous waste of equipment. He was determined to find a way to keep those pans in use all year long, to create a product that could turn a profit even when strawberries were out of season. His solution was an exercise in delicious simplicity. He took the basic sponge cake batter from the shortcake recipe and poured it into those idle pans. But a plain little cake wasn't enough to stand out. The true moment of inspiration was the filling. Instead of relying on a seasonal fruit on top, he decided to inject a creamy, sweet, and shelf-stable banana cream filling right into the center of the cake. This created a self-contained snack, a perfect handheld treat that was both a cake and its own topping. The initial product was called the Hostess Shortcake, but the name didn't quite capture its unique appeal. The legend goes that shortly after its creation, Dew was driving through St. Louis when he saw a billboard for Twinkle Toes shoes. He loved the playfulness of the word twinkle and thought it perfectly matched the lightness and fun of his new snack. He tweaked it slightly and the Twinkie was officially born. It was an immediate hit, priced at just a nickel for a pack of 2 during the Depression. It offered an affordable moment of sweet escapism during the toughest of times. But the Twinkie story was almost derailed by a global crisis. During World War II, bananas were rationed and became incredibly scarce. Faced with a crippling shortage of his key ingredient, banana cream, Duo had to pivot once again. He switched to a vanilla cream filling, a flavor that was cheaper, easier to produce, and ironically, far more popular with the public. This accidental change turned out to be the making of the Twinkie's legendary status. The vanilla cream became its permanent and now iconic identity. The Twinkie's journey from a practical solution to a cultural touchstone is a story of brilliant marketing and unexpected durability. It became a lunchbox staple, a star in holiday recipes, and even a prop in one of the most famous urban legends of all time. The myth of its indestructibility, fueled by its impressively long shelf life thanks to its lack of dairy-based ingredients. This perceived immortality was put to the ultimate test in 2012 when the Hostess company filed for bankruptcy and announced it would cease operations. The news sparked a nationwide panic. Headlines declared the death of the Twinkie, and consumers began hoarding boxes, with some packs selling for hundreds of dollars online. This public outcry wasn't just about losing a snack, it was about potentially losing a piece of American identity. The demand was so overwhelming that it prompted a swift financial rescue. The company's assets and beloved brands were purchased by new owners, and the Twinkie was back on shelves in a matter of months, its legend not only intact but more powerful than ever. Today, the Twinkie endures as a testament to the power of a simple, clever idea. James Duo wasn't trying to invent a national icon, he was just trying to solve a logistics problem and keep his baking pans busy. In doing so, he created a snack that would outlive its own parent company, a golden sponge cake that became a symbol of American resilience, nostalgia, and our enduring, if sometimes guilty, appetite for sweet, creamy, and utterly indestructible junk food. But while the Twinkie offered a taste of sweet resilience, another American invention was emerging with a far more serious and life-saving purpose, one aimed at curbing a dangerous behavior that had long plagued the nation's roadways. For much of the early 20th century, proving a driver was under the influence was a shockingly subjective affair. Law enforcement relied on highly unreliable field sobriety tests, walking a straight line, touching one's nose, or reciting the alphabet, which could be failed by someone who was simply nervous, injured, or uncoordinated, regardless of their sobriety. The need for an objective, scientific measure was dire, and the first steps toward a solution were as crude as the problem itself. In the 1930s, Dr. Rolla N. Harger, a professor of toxicology and biochemistry at Indiana University, patented a device he called the drunkometer. It was a bulky, complicated contraption. A suspect would blow into a balloon, and the captured breath would then be released through a chemical solution that would change color based on the presence of alcohol. While it was a step toward scientific proof, the drunkometer was slow, required a lab-like setting, and was far from practical for roadside use. The true revolution arrived 2 decades later, born from the mind of a man who was not a scientist in a white lab coat, but a captain with the Indiana State Police. Robert Borkenstein had spent years working in the state police's photography laboratory and was deeply familiar with the tragic aftermath of alcohol-related crashes. He had also worked directly with Dr. Harger and understood the limitations of the drunkometer firsthand. Borkenstein was driven by a practical need to create a device that was portable, easy to use, and could provide rapid, accurate results right at the traffic stop. In 1954, after years of experimentation, he unveiled his masterpiece, the breathalyzer. The name itself was a perfect descriptor of its function, combining breath and analyzer. Its design was a marvel of elegant simplicity compared to its predecessors. The core of Borkenstein's invention was a chemical reaction based on the principle that the amount of alcohol in a person's breath is directly proportional to the amount in their bloodstream. When a suspect blew into the device, their breath sample was captured in a cylindrical chamber. Inside, the alcohol in the breath would react with a mixture of sulfuric acid, potassium dichromate, silver nitrate, and water. The key was the potassium dichromate, a reddish-orange compound that would turn green as it oxidized the alcohol. The more alcohol present in the breath, the more the chemical would change color. A photoelectric cell would then measure the precise degree of this color change, and a needle would move across a calibrated scale, providing a direct numerical reading of the subject's blood alcohol content, or BAC. This objective number, this scientific fact, could now be presented in a court of law. The impact of the breathalyzer was immediate and profound. It transformed drunk driving enforcement from a matter of subjective opinion into one of indisputable scientific evidence. It gave law enforcement a powerful tool to identify and remove impaired drivers from the road before they could cause a tragedy, acting as a massive deterrent. For the first time, drivers knew they could be scientifically and accurately tested, making them think twice before getting behind the wheel after drinking. The breathalyzer quickly became the global standard, adopted by police forces worldwide and saving countless thousands of lives by preventing accidents that would have otherwise occurred. Bolkenstein himself never stopped advocating for its use and for stricter drunk driving laws, dedicating his life to the cause of roadway safety. His invention stands as a powerful example of practical innovation, where a deep understanding of a real-world problem, combined with scientific principles, can yield a solution of immense social good, proving that some of the most important American inventions aren't about convenience or entertainment, but about protection and justice. And from the life-saving science of the breathalyzer, we turn to an invention that solved a problem of a much smaller, yet incredibly universal, scale: the simple, maddening frustration of a bookmark that just won't stay put. This story begins not with a clear goal, but with a spectacular failure. In 1968, a chemist at the manufacturing giant 3M named Spencer Silver was tasked with a specific mission: develop a super-strong adhesive for use in the aerospace industry. Silver was working on acrylate copolymers, and during one experiment, he deliberately deviated from the standard formula, hoping to create a new kind of bonding agent. Instead of a powerful glue, he created the exact opposite. His new polymer was laughably weak. It formed tiny, reusable microspheres that would stick to a surface but could be easily lifted off without leaving any residue. It was a low-tack, pressure-sensitive adhesive. In the world of industrial glue, where strength is everything, Silver's creation was, by all traditional measures, a complete dud. For the next 5 years, Spencer Silver became a man on a mission, but his mission was an incredibly difficult one. He had to try and convince everyone at 3M that his useless glue actually had a use. He called it his solution without a problem. He gave endless seminars and presentations to his colleagues, passing around samples and trying to brainstorm applications. Maybe it could be a sticky surface for a bulletin board, perhaps a tacky spray for street painters to use as temporary stencils, but nothing ever stuck, so to speak. The corporate culture at 3M famously encouraged employees to spend 15% of their time on their own pet projects, a policy designed to foster innovation. But even with this support, Silver's glue was going nowhere. It seemed destined to be a footnote in the company's archives, a curious chemical oddity that never found its purpose. The savior of this failed adhesive arrived in the form of a colleague and choir singer named Art Fry. Fry had attended one of Silver's seminars and, like everyone else, had mostly forgotten about the weak glue. The problem that would spark his Eureka moment was a personal one. Fry sang in his church choir every Sunday, and he used little scraps of paper to mark the hymns in his hymnal for the weekly service. It was a constant annoyance. The paper bookmarks would constantly slip out, fluttering to the floor and leaving him frantically page-turning to find the right song during the service. One Sunday, it happened again, and in his frustration, Fry remembered Spencer Silver's semi-sticky glue. A light bulb went off. What if he could put a light strip of that adhesive on a piece of paper? It would be just sticky enough to hold its place in the book, but weak enough to be removed without tearing the delicate, thin paper of the hymnal pages. Fry went to work in the 3M labs using some of the adhesive and applying it to yellow scrap paper, yellow simply because that was the color of the spare paper available in the lab next door. He found it worked perfectly. He could mark his hymnal pages and the little notes would stay put until he was ready to remove them. He soon began using the sticky notes around the office to mark pages in reports and leave non-permanent messages for his colleagues. This was the true revelation. The notes weren't just bookmarks, they were a revolutionary new form of communication. Unlike a memo that was meant to be filed away, these WERE Chinese letter, fleeting and conversational. They could be stuck right on a document, a desk, or a door, exactly where the message needed to be seen. Co-workers started asking Fry for their own pads of these magical sticky notes, and demand began to organically grow from within the company itself. Even with this internal buzz, the path to market was not smooth. Initial market research was a disaster. When 3M launched the product as Press and Peel pads in 1977 in 4 test cities, consumers were utterly baffled. They didn't understand what the product was for. It was so simple, so seemingly obvious that people couldn't grasp its utility until they actually used it. The product was a flop and was pulled from shelves, but a handful of believers at 3M refused to give up. The following year, they changed their strategy entirely. Instead of trying to sell the product through traditional advertising, they decided to let the product sell itself. They initiated the Boys Blitz, named after the city of Boise, Idaho. They went door to door in the city's business district, giving away free samples of the now renamed Post-it notes to every single office secretary and manager they could find. The strategy was pure genius. Once people had a pad on their desk and experienced the sheer convenience of leaving a temporary, non-damaging note, they were hooked. They couldn't imagine their workflow without them. Reorders flooded in. The rest is history. Post-it notes exploded onto the global stage, becoming an instant and enduring office essential. Their iconic canary yellow color, chosen by chance, became a symbol of organization and bright ideas. They transformed from a simple bookmark into a fundamental tool for brainstorming, project management, and everyday communication. They've been used to write songs, plan military operations, and sketch out billion-dollar business ideas. The story of the Post-it note is the ultimate testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of a culture that allows for so-called failures. Spencer Silver didn't set out to create a sticky note. He set out to create a super glue and failed. Art Fry didn't set out to revolutionize office supplies. He just wanted to mark his hymnal without losing his place. It was the combination of a prepared mind, a personal problem, and a corporate environment willing to nurture a strange idea that finally turned a solution without a problem into one of the most recognizable and indispensable inventions of the modern era. While Henry Ford didn't invent the automobile or even the concept of an assembly process, his vision for the Highland Park plant in 1913 synthesized these ideas into something that would utterly transform the modern world. Ford's genius wasn't in creating a single new machine, but in reimagining the entire dance of manufacturing itself. Before this revolution, automobiles were painstakingly crafted by teams of highly skilled workers who would assemble an entire car from the ground up in a single spot, a process that took over 12 hours per vehicle. This artisanal approach made cars luxurious novelties, affordable only to the wealthiest citizens. Ford looked at this inefficiency and saw a different path. He was obsessed with a single, powerful idea, making a car so inexpensive that every average American family could afford one. The breakthrough came from a seemingly mundane observation: the overhead trolley system used by Chicago meatpackers to disassemble animal carcasses. If a moving chain could make the process of taking something apart more efficient, Ford reasoned, why couldn't the same principle be applied in reverse to put something together? At the Highland Park plant, his engineers installed the world's first moving chassis line. The innovation was breathtakingly simple, yet its impact was earth-shattering. Instead of teams of men moving from stationary car to stationary car, the car itself would now move, gliding slowly and continuously down a line at a constant pace of 6 feet per minute. At each station, a worker had one single, specific and repetitive task to perform. One man would only attach a wheel, another would only tighten a specific set of bolts. A third would only install the radiator. This hyper-specialization meant each worker could perform their one task with incredible speed and efficiency, mastering a motion they would repeat hundreds of times a day. The results were nothing short of miraculous. The time required to build a single Model T plummeted from 12.5 hours to an astonishing 93 minutes. This staggering jump in productivity allowed Ford to slash the price of the Model T from an already low $850 in 1908 to just $260 by 1925, all while famously doubling his workers' pay to an unprecedented $5 a day. This wasn't just altruism, it was a brilliant business strategy. Ford understood that by paying his workers more, he was also creating a new class of consumers who could now afford to buy the very cars they were building. He was literally manufacturing his own customer base, igniting the engine of 20th century consumerism. This new system, which Ford termed mass production, did far more than just create affordable cars. It fundamentally reshaped the American landscape and psyche. It gave rise to the suburbs as people could now live further from their workplaces. It created the family road trip and gave birth to an entire ecosystem of supporting industries, gas stations, motels, diners, and paved highways. It set a new standard for manufacturing that was rapidly adopted for everything from washing machines to radios, flooding the market with affordable goods and creating a culture of abundance that defined the modern American dream. Yet, this incredible efficiency came at a profound human cost that sparked intense debate which continues to this day. The very specialization that made the assembly line so efficient also made the work soul-crushingly monotonous. Workers were no longer craftsmen who took pride in building an entire automobile. They were cogs in a vast, impersonal machine, performing the same micro-task every minute of every hour of every day. The relentless, unvarying pace led to high employee turnover as the boredom and physical strain were immense. The writer Aldous Huxley would later chillingly satirize this dehumanizing aspect in his novel Brave New World, and Charlie Chaplin famously lampooned its absurdities in his film Modern Times, showing a factory worker driven to madness by the repetitive motions. Ford's assembly line created a paradox of prosperity. It generated immense wealth and lifted millions into the middle class, but it also alienated the worker from the product of their labor and from their own sense of purpose. It prioritized the value of efficiency and output above all else, including human creativity and satisfaction. This tension between economic progress and human well-being is the complex legacy of the moving line. It was a monumental invention that gave the world unprecedented material comfort and mobility, but it also forced society to grapple with a new industrial age question. What is the true price of progress, and are we willing to pay it? And while the assembly line optimized the production of physical goods, a revolution of a different kind was quietly taking shape in a laboratory, one that would ultimately optimize light itself, reshaping how we illuminate our world and view our screens. For decades after the invention of the first practical red light-emitting diode in the 1960s, the holy grail of semiconductor physics was the creation of a bright, efficient blue LED. Scientists and engineers at the world's largest electronics firms understood the monumental implications. With a reliable red, a growing green, and a true blue, You could combine the three primary colors of light to create pure, brilliant white. This breakthrough would unlock the potential for energy-efficient general lighting and full-color LED displays. But for nearly 30 years, that blue light remained a tantalizing, elusive dream. The scientific hurdles were immense, primarily centered on the material used. Most researchers were focused on using a crystal called gallium nitride, but they hit a seemingly insurmountable wall. No one could figure out how to grow a high-quality, defect-free film of it on a substrate, and no one could get it to reliably produce a strong p-type layer, a crucial component for creating the light-emitting p-n junction. Into this formidable challenge stepped a man operating far from the well-funded corporate labs of giants like Sony or Panasonic. Shuji Nakamura was a young, relatively unknown engineer working for a small Japanese chemical company called Nikia, which primarily made phosphors for television tubes. Assigned the Blue LED project with a tiny budget and little expectation of success, Nakamura was the ultimate underdog. While the entire scientific community was stuck, he took a radically different and, at the time, heretical approach. Instead of growing the gallium nitride on the commonly used sapphire substrate, he first grew a thin layer of a different material, gallium aluminum nitride, which acted as a buffer and dramatically reduced the defects in the subsequent gallium nitride layer. This was his first critical breakthrough, solving the crystal quality problem that had stumped everyone else. His second, and perhaps even more brilliant, innovation was in solving the p-type layer dilemma. The conventional wisdom was that gallium nitride was intrinsically hard to turn into p-type material, but Nakamura had a simple, almost shockingly straightforward idea. After growing the material, he bombarded it with a stream of electrons in a process called low-energy electron beam irradiation. This treatment, which many of his peers would have considered crude, miraculously activated the p-type layer, making it highly conductive and allowing for the efficient flow of holes necessary for light emission. In 1993, after years of solitary, determined work, Nakamura achieved the impossible. He presented the world's first high-brightness blue LED. The scientific community was stunned. A researcher from a tiny company working with a fraction of the resources had beaten the giants at their own game. The impact of this single invention cannot be overstated. It was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. Almost immediately, engineers realized they could coat a blue LED with a yellow phosphor, a technology Nikia already excelled in, to create a bright, warm, or cool white light. This simple combination gave birth to the white LED bulb. Compared to incandescent bulbs, which waste 90% of their energy as heat or even compact fluorescence, LED lights are phenomenally efficient, converting most of their energy directly into light and lasting for tens of thousands of hours. This efficiency has triggered a global lighting revolution, slashing electricity demand for illumination and reducing carbon emissions on a massive scale. Beyond lighting, Nakamura's blue LED is the fundamental engine behind every modern screen you use. The LCD screen on your laptop, your television, or your phone doesn't produce its own light, it's a filter. It's the grid of tiny red, green, and blue LEDs sitting behind that LCD panel that creates the full spectrum of color and brilliant white you see, enabling the vivid, energy-efficient displays that define our digital age. For this monumental achievement, Shuji Nakamura, along with his fellow pioneers Isamu Akasaki and Hiroshi Amano, was rightfully awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2014. His story is a powerful testament to the fact that world-changing innovation isn't always born in the largest corporate labs, but can spring from the relentless curiosity and unconventional thinking of a single, determined mind. While the assembly line optimized manufacturing and the blue LED optimized light itself, our next invention emerged from a quest to optimize the human soul, or at least to curb its more earthly desires. Long before modern diet fads, a fiery Presbyterian minister named Sylvester Graham launched one of America's first health food crusades in the early 19th century. Graham was a man gripped by a powerful, if peculiar, conviction that what you ate directly dictated your moral and spiritual health. He was a leading voice in the temperance movement, but his concerns ran far deeper than alcohol. He believed that a diet rich in meat, spices, white bread, and fats overstimulated the body, inflamed the passions, and led to a host of sins, most notably the dreaded vice of masturbation, which he viewed as a path to physical and mental decay. To save the nation from this spiral of sensuality, Graham preached a doctrine of extreme austerity at the table. His prescription was a diet of raw fruits and vegetables, cold water, and whole grain. The centerpiece of this bland new world was a special bread. Graham was a fierce critic of the commercial bakeries of his time, which used bleached white flour and often added alum and chalk to make their loaves whiter and heavier. He argued for a return to simplicity, flour that was coarsely ground at home from the entire wheat berry, including the nutrient-rich bran and germ. This Graham flour was the basis for his signature creation, a plain, unsweetened, and decidedly unexciting cracker. The Graham cracker was never meant to be tasty. Its purpose was functional and moral. It was designed to be digestible, nutritious, and most importantly, non-stimulating. It was the edible embodiment of self-denial, a culinary tool to cool the blood and quiet the libido. Graham's followers, known as Grahamites, embraced this ascetic lifestyle with fervor, and the cracker became a symbol of their purity. The irony, of course, is almost too perfect. The very cracker invented to suppress sensual pleasure would, a century later, become the foundation for some of America's most indulgent treats. The transformation began slowly. As the cracker's popularity grew beyond the Grahamites, commercial bakeries saw a market opportunity. To make the dry, fibrous wafer more palatable to the masses, they began adding sugar, honey, and cinnamon. The health food was sweetened into a snack. Then came the masterstroke of campfire ingenuity, the s'more. No one knows the exact origin, but by the early 20th century, the recipe for sandwiching a roasted marshmallow and a piece of chocolate between two Graham crackers was appearing in Girl Scout guides, cementing its place as the quintessential American outdoor dessert. The cracker created to curb desire had become the vehicle for gooey, messy, utterly delightful decadence. Its journey didn't stop there. Crushed and mixed with butter and sugar, the reformed Graham cracker found a second life as the crust for countless cheesecakes and key lime pies, providing the sweet, crunchy foundation that holds together creamy fillings. The ultimate symbol of this inversion is the boxed Graham cracker you find in any supermarket today. It is often made with refined flour and is decidedly sweet, a far cry from Sylvester Graham's original austere vision. His name endures, but his mission has been completely subverted by the very consumerism he sought to defeat. The story of the Graham cracker is a hilarious and profound lesson in the unpredictable afterlife of an invention. It reminds us that an object's purpose is never fixed. It can be reinvented, reinterpreted, and utterly transformed by culture, often landing at the exact opposite point from where it began. A tool for suppressing pleasure became a cornerstone of culinary delight, proving that even the most solemn intentions can't always compete with a really good recipe. Yet, even as we harnessed light and refined our diets, a quieter revolution was taking shape, one aimed at amplifying something far more personal, the human voice for those who could no longer hear it clearly. For centuries, the only tools for the hearing impaired were crude, funnel-shaped ear trumpets that offered minimal amplification by simply collecting and channeling sound waves. These passive devices were a stopgap at best, leaving millions in a world of muffled silence and isolation. The true breakthrough would not come from a simple horn, but from the same technology that was beginning to connect continents, the telephone. The man who made this crucial connection was a young, brilliant Alabama inventor named Miller Reese Hutchison. Hutchison was a close friend and frequent visitor to the family of Mabel Hubbard, the wife of telephone pioneer Alexander Graham Bell. Mabel herself had been rendered deaf by a childhood bout of scarlet fever. Hutchison witnessed firsthand her struggles to participate in conversations and the profound loneliness that her hearing loss created. Deeply moved and driven by a desire to help, he became obsessed with finding a way to electrically amplify sound. His Eureka moment arrived in 1898 with a device he called the acouphone. Hutchison's genius was his adaptation of the carbon grain transmitter, a key component in early telephones. In a telephone, this transmitter converted the sound waves of a voice into a variable electrical signal that could be sent down a wire. Hutchison realized he could use the same principle in reverse to take a weak sound, convert it into an electrical signal, amplify that signal with a battery, and then use a receiver to convert that boosted signal back into a much louder sound directly into the user's ear. The first acouphone was a monumental achievement, but it was far from practical. It was a massive, table-sized apparatus that weighed nearly 200 pounds, consisting of a separate microphone, a large battery, an amplifier unit, and a headset. Using it was a cumbersome process. A speaker would talk into the handheld microphone, and the listener would wear the receiving headset. It was essentially a personal, indoor public address system. Despite its size and complexity, it worked. It offered a level of amplification never before possible, and for those like Mabel Hubbard who used it, the experience was nothing short of miraculous, hearing a clear, distinct human voice, perhaps for the first time in years. Hutchison continued to refine his invention, and by 1901 he had created a more portable, though still bulky, suitcase-sized model that he marketed with some success. The evolution of the hearing aid from Hutchison's heavy acouphone to today's nearly invisible devices is a story of relentless miniaturization, each leap forward driven by a new American technological revolution. The next major step came with the invention of the vacuum tube in the early 20th century, which allowed for a much greater and cleaner amplification of sound than carbon transmitters. These devices were still large, often worn in a harness under clothing with wires running to an earpiece and a separate battery pack. The real transformation began after World War II with the invention of the transistor at Bell Labs. Transistors were tiny, used very little power, and generated almost no heat, making them the perfect component to shrink hearing aids down to a device that could be worn entirely on the head. The first behind-the-ear models and then eyeglass-style aids emerged, offering unprecedented discretion and convenience. The final revolution was the shift from analog to digital processing in the 1990s. This was more than just another step in miniaturization. It was a complete reimagining of what a hearing aid could do. Instead of simply making all sounds louder, digital aids could now be programmed with sophisticated computer chips to act as intelligent sound processors. They could distinguish between speech and background noise, amplifying the former while suppressing the latter. They could be fine-tuned by an audiologist to match the user's specific hearing loss profile across different frequencies. Modern hearing aids can connect wirelessly to smartphones, televisions, and microphones, streaming sound directly into the ear with crystal clarity. They are not just amplifiers, they are powerful, miniaturized computers dedicated to auditory clarity. Miller Reese Hutchison's initial, clunky invention set in motion a chain of innovation that has restored a fundamental human connection for millions. His work, born from empathy and a desire to alleviate the suffering of a friend, showcases a different, profoundly human side of American ingenuity. It's not always about building something bigger, faster, or more powerful. Sometimes the most important inventions are those that amplify our ability to simply understand and be understood by one another, quietly weaving a thread of connection back into the fabric of daily life. Meanwhile, in a California garage not far from the skate parks that birthed a different kind of rebellion, a teenage tinkerer was building a portal to another world entirely. For decades, virtual reality had been the stuff of science fiction, a tantalizing dream that always seemed to be a decade away, expensive, clunky, and plagued by laggy motion tracking and nauseating low resolution. VR headsets were confined to multi-million-dollar military and university labs, utterly inaccessible to the public. The dream had largely faded, considered a technological dead end. But Palmer Luckey, a homeschooled electronics whiz with a passion for collecting vintage VR prototypes, looked at these failures and saw not impossibility, but a series of engineering puzzles waiting to be solved. He wasn't a scientist at a corporate lab. He was an obsessive hobbyist operating out of his parents' garage, surrounded by soldering irons and a sprawling collection of over 50 failed headsets from previous eras. His goal was simple yet audacious: to build the affordable, high-performance and immersive headset that the big companies had failed to deliver. Luckey's Eureka, a moment, wasn't a single breakthrough, but a series of clever workarounds that rethought the entire problem. Instead of relying on exotic, custom-made components that drove the cost into the stratosphere, he looked to the consumer electronics market for off-the-shelf parts. His key insight was the display. He realized that the recent explosion of high-end smartphones had created a market for beautiful, high-resolution and incredibly small screens. He purchased a 5.6-inch screen intended for a Chinese-made mobile phone, a component that was both brilliant and affordable. For the lenses, he turned to an unlikely source: military surplus. He sourced wide field of view optics designed for military devices, which allowed him to wrap the image around the user's peripheral vision, creating a much more immersive feeling than the tiny, binocular-like views of past headsets. He then combined these with sophisticated motion tracking sensors also pulled from the mobile world, all housed in a shell he lovingly crafted from ski goggles and duct tape. The result was a prototype he called the Rift. It was crude, held together with hot glue and tethered by a nest of wires to a powerful computer, but when you put it on, it worked. It was a revelation. The field of view was expansive, the latency was low enough to avoid immediate nausea, and for the first time it offered a genuine glimpse of presence, the feeling of actually being inside a digital world. The story could have ended there as another cool garage project, but Luckey, understanding the limits of his own resources, decided to share his creation with the world. He posted about it on the online forum meant to be seen, a gathering place for a small, dedicated community of VR enthusiasts. It was there that his post caught the eye of John Carmack, the legendary programming genius behind revolutionary video games like Doom and Quake. Carmack, a lifelong VR fan himself, was blown away by the Rift's potential. He contacted Luckey, obtained a prototype, and famously hacked together a driver that allowed it to run his classic game Doom 3. When Carmack showcased this modified Rift prototype at the E3 video game conference in 2012, the reaction was seismic. Gamers and developers lined up for hours to experience it, and the footage of their stunned, awe-struck reactions went viral overnight. The dormant dream of VR was suddenly, shockingly alive again. Realizing they had lightning in a bottle, Luckey and Carmack, along with Brendan Iribe and other seasoned tech entrepreneurs, launched a Kickstarter campaign in August 2012 to fund the development of a consumer-ready version. Their goal was a modest $250,000. They obliterated it, raising nearly $2.5 million from almost 10,000 backers, a clear signal that the public hunger for real VR was ravenous. The Kickstarter backers didn't just get a dev kit, they became evangelists, a grassroots army of developers who began creating the first software for this new platform. The momentum was now unstoppable. The project attracted the attention of every major tech giant, but it was Facebook, led by Mark Zuckerberg, who saw the most profound long-term potential. In 2014, in a move that stunned the industry, Facebook acquired Oculus VR for a staggering $2 billion. Zuckerberg didn't just see a gaming peripheral. He envisioned VR as the next major computing platform after mobile, a revolutionary new medium for social connection, remote work, and immersive experiences. The acquisition was a catalyst that launched the modern VR arms race. It legitimized the technology overnight, prompting immediate multi-billion-dollar investments from companies like Google, Microsoft, Sony, and Valve. The flood of capital and competition accelerated development at a breakneck pace, leading to the consumer release of the Oculus Rift in 2016 and a host of competing headsets. The impact of Lucky's Garage project now extends far beyond the gaming world where it was born. Surgeons use VR simulators to practice complex procedures without risk. Medical students can take a guided tour through a detailed, beating human heart, and architects walk clients through virtual buildings long before the foundation is poured. It has become a powerful tool for treating PTSD through controlled exposure therapy and for social connection, allowing people separated by vast distances to feel as if they are sharing the same virtual space, watching a movie or playing a game together on a cosmic scale. From a teenager's passion project to a $2 billion industry-shifting phenomenon, the story of the Oculus Rift is a modern-day David and Goliath tale, proving that with enough ingenuity and a perfectly timed idea, a single person in a garage can still redefine reality for everyone. Now, while the Oculus Rift was building portals to digital worlds, another American innovator was perfecting a far more tangible and arguably more delicious kind of magic, the art of putting an entire meal on a stick. The story of the corn dog is a beautiful, greasy slice of pure American pragmatism, a tale that takes us straight to the bustling, noisy heart of the state fair. While numerous vendors across the country laid claim to the general idea of a battered, fried hot dog in the early 1940s, the version that cemented itself as a national icon has a very specific birthplace, the 1942 Texas State Fair. And its most famous pioneer was a man named Neil Fletcher. The problem Fletcher aimed to solve was a classic one for fairgoers. How do you eat a hot dog while walking around without getting mustard and relish all over your hands and clothes? The solution he devised was a masterpiece of edible engineering. He took a standard hot dog, skewered it clean through with a sturdy wooden stick, creating a natural handle. Then he enveloped it in a simple, savory cornmeal batter, a recipe deeply rooted in Southern cooking traditions, and plunged the whole assembly into a vat of bubbling hot oil. The result was nothing short of alchemy. The hot dog cooked inside its own crispy, golden brown shell, a self-contained, perfectly portable, and miraculously drip-free meal. It was brilliant in its simplicity. You got the entire experience, the juicy, savory meat and the warm, fluffy bread in one perfectly engineered handheld package. Fletcher reportedly sold his creation for just a nickel a piece, and it was an instant, massive hit. The convenience was undeniable and the deliciousness was irresistible. Of course, as with many great American foods, the true origins are a bit murkier and more contested. Various accounts point to similar creations appearing at other fairs around the same time. Some credit a couple in Oregon who patented a pronto pup in the late 1930s, while others point to vendors in Minnesota and Illinois. But it was the Texas version, popularized and perfected by Neil Fletcher, that truly captured the nation's imagination and became the standard bearer. The name itself is a point of regional pride. While corn dog became the universal term, you'll still find passionate defenders of the pronto pup, or simply a fried hot dog on a stick, in different parts of the country. Regardless of its precise origin story, the corn dog's rise to iconic status was meteoric. It quickly became an indispensable fixture of the American carnival and state fair landscape. Its appeal was universal, crossing all demographic lines. For kids, it was a thrilling, fun food, a treat literally designed to be eaten on the go. For adults, it was a satisfying, hearty, and affordable meal that perfectly complemented a day of carnival games and livestock exhibits. The corn dog mastered the art of portability without sacrificing flavor, a culinary innovation that perfectly suited the mobile, on-the-fly American lifestyle. Its success spawned countless variations, from mini corn dogs served as party appetizers to more gourmet interpretations featuring artisanal sausages and craft beer-infused batters. But at its core, the classic corn dog remains unchanged, a perfect golden brown symbol of joy, a little bit of messy, deep-fried Americana that continues to define the experience of a day at the fair, proving that sometimes the most enduring inventions are those that solve the simplest problems with a stroke of deep-fried genius. Of course, while the corn dog offered a perfect handheld solution for fairground hunger under the hood of the American automobile, engineers were wrestling with a far more complex problem of delivery and precision. For the first half of the 20th century, the heart of a car's engine was a decidedly low-tech mechanical device, the carburetor. This intricate web of valves, floats, and jets was a masterpiece of analog engineering, tasked with the crucial job of mixing just the right amount of air and gasoline into a combustible vapor. But it was notoriously finicky. It had to be manually adjusted for altitude and temperature. It was prone to icing up in cold, damp weather, and it struggled to provide the instant, perfect mixture needed for sudden acceleration or smooth idling. It was, in essence, a one-size-fits-all solution that never quite fit perfectly, leading to wasted fuel, rough performance, and plumes of unburned hydrocarbons spewing from the tailpipe. The quest for a better way wasn't new. Mechanical fuel injection systems existed, most famously on the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL racing car in the 1950s. But these were complex, expensive, and strictly for the elite. The true revolution, the one that would eventually democratize precision fuel delivery, began not in Germany, but in Detroit with a defense contractor better known for aviation and aerospace. In 1957, the Bendix Corporation introduced a system they called the electrojector. This was a radical departure from anything that had come before. Instead of relying on vacuum pressures or mechanical linkages, the electrojector used a primitive analog computer, a transistorized control unit to monitor engine conditions like manifold pressure and crankshaft position. This computer would then send timed electronic pulses to solenoids that injected a precisely metered burst of fuel directly into the intake manifold, right near the cylinder head. The potential was staggering. By precisely controlling the fuel mixture for each cylinder individually, the system promised a dramatic leap in efficiency, power, and responsiveness. An engine could start instantly in the coldest weather, accelerate without the frustrating flat spot or hesitation common with carburetors, and theoretically run much cleaner. American Motors saw this potential and decided to take a monumental gamble. They offered the Bendix electrojector as a rare, high-tech option on their 1957 Rambler Rebel, making it the first production car in the world with electronic fuel injection. It was a bold vision of the future, but in practice it was a spectacular failure. The technology was simply too far ahead of its time. The transistors of the era were notoriously unreliable, especially when subjected to the extreme heat and vibration under the hood of a car. The system would often fail completely on damp mornings, leaving early adopters stranded. After a single model year and very few sales, the option was abruptly discontinued, and the electrojector was written off as a fascinating but flawed experiment. The idea, however, did not die. The patents and the core research were licensed to a German company that saw the long-term potential where American manufacturers saw only short-term failure, Robert Bosch GmbH. Bosch's engineers spent over a decade refining and re-engineering the concept. They replaced the fragile transistors with robust solid-state electronics and developed a more reliable and precise injection mechanism. In 1967, they unveiled their perfected system, the D-Jetronic, which was first adopted by Volkswagen on their Type 3 model. This time it worked. And it worked brilliantly. The reliability was there, and the performance benefits were immediately obvious to European drivers and automakers. The system slowly gained traction throughout the 1970s, but its true catalyst was not performance but policy. The looming environmental regulations and strict emissions standards in the United States, particularly the Clean Air Act amendments and the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, created an existential crisis for the carburetor. It simply could not provide the consistent, lean, and clean burn required to meet the new laws. Electronic fuel injection, or EFI, was the only technology ready to meet the challenge. By the mid-80s, it rapidly displaced the carburetor in nearly every new car sold in America. The impact of this quiet takeover was profound. Modern EFI systems, now managed by incredibly powerful engine control units, don't just inject fuel. They constantly fine-tune the entire engine's operation hundreds of times per second, adjusting for everything from air temperature to the amount of oxygen in the exhaust. This meticulous control is the primary reason why today's cars can produce astonishing power from small engines while achieving fuel economy and emitting a fraction of the pollutants of their predecessors. The unceremonious failure of the Bendix electrojector is a classic story of a brilliant idea born before its time, a testament to the fact that the spark of innovation often requires the right materials, the right engineering, and the right moment in history to finally catch fire and change the world. But for all the mechanical precision of fuel injection and the digital wizardry of virtual reality, one of the most profound revolutions in American daily life didn't involve a microchip or an engine at all. It was an architectural and psychological shift that transformed how we interact with the most fundamental of human necessities, food. For centuries, the experience of shopping for groceries was a slow, social, and deeply personal transaction. You would walk into a store, hand your list to a clerk behind a long counter, and wait while they gathered your items from shelves that stretched to the ceiling, a process known as the full-service model. It was inefficient, it was time-consuming, and it gave the customer almost no autonomy. You couldn't browse, you couldn't compare prices, and you were often at the mercy of the clerk's suggestions or mood. A man named Clarence Saunders, a flamboyant and ambitious grocery entrepreneur in Memphis, Tennessee, saw this inefficiency not as a tradition but as an opportunity. He was convinced that the high costs of this labor-intensive system were being passed directly to the consumer. His radical idea was to turn the entire shopping process on its head, eliminate the counter and the clerks, and let the customers serve themselves. In 1916, he secured a patent for his self-serving store concept and opened the very first location of a store with a name so memorably odd it would become legendary, Piggly Wiggly. The public was baffled by the name, a story Saunders loved to embellish, once claiming he saw a group of piglets wiggling under a fence and thought it was catchy, but they were utterly captivated by the experience inside. Stepping into that first Piggly Wiggly was like entering a retail laboratory. Saunders had designed a carefully orchestrated labyrinth. Customers entered through a single turnstile, picked up a shopping basket, and then followed a predetermined one-way route through a series of aisles. Every single item in the store was out in the open, each with a clearly marked price tag, another Saunders innovation. This was the birth of item pricing, which empowered shoppers to know the exact cost of everything before they decided to buy. No longer did you have to ask a clerk or wait for a total at the counter. As you wound your way through the aisles, you were exposed to every product in the store, a deliberate strategy that encouraged impulse buys. At the end of the maze was another revolutionary concept, the first ever dedicated checkout line. A single cashier would tally your purchases on one of the new modern cash registers. You would pay, and then you would exit through a separate door. The impact was immediate and staggering. Saunders's self-service model slashed labor costs by as much as 75%, allowing him to lower prices and attract hordes of customers. But the savings were only part of the appeal. Shoppers, particularly women who were the primary grocery buyers of the era, loved the new sense of freedom and control. They could take their time, inspect the merchandise, and make their own choices without any pressure or judgment. It was retail democracy. The success of Piggly Wiggly was meteoric. By the early 1920s, just a few years after opening that first store, there were over 1,200 Piggly Wiggly franchises across the country, making Clarence Saunders a multi-millionaire and a national celebrity. His company was even publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Saunders's genius lay in his understanding of human psychology and logistics. His store wasn't just a room with shelves, it was a meticulously engineered system designed to maximize efficiency and spending. The turnstiles controlled traffic flow, the one-way path ensured no product was missed, the open shelves turned shopping from a chore into an exploratory activity. And the checkout line created a natural conclusion to the journey. This basic blueprint, conceived in a Memphis storefront, became the absolute foundational DNA for every single modern supermarket, big box store, and warehouse club on the planet. From the sprawling aisles of Walmart to the minimalist elegance of an Apple store, the ghost of Piggly Wiggly is everywhere. Clarence Saunders didn't just invent a new type of store. He invented the very concept of self-service retail, an innovation that fundamentally reshaped the landscape of commerce and cemented itself as an indispensable cornerstone of American and global daily life. And while Clarence Saunders was revolutionizing how we walk through a store, another pair of American inventors was about to change what happens at the very end of that journey, the checkout counter. The story of the barcode is a tale of necessity, frustration, and a moment of brilliant inspiration drawn literally in the sand. In 1948, a young graduate student named Bernard Silver was walking the halls of the Drexel Institute of Technology in Philadelphia when he overheard a conversation that would set everything in motion. The president of a local food chain was pleading with one of Drexel's deans, asking if the institute's engineers could possibly develop a system to automatically read product information during checkout. The dean politely declined, but Silver was captivated. He rushed to tell his friend and fellow graduate student, Norman Joseph Woodland, about the problem. Woodland, a natural-born inventor who had worked on the Manhattan Project, was immediately intrigued. He was convinced it was solvable. Woodland became so obsessed with the challenge that he actually dropped out of graduate school to dedicate himself fully to finding a solution. His first idea was to use patterns of ink that would glow under ultraviolet light, but this proved messy and unreliable. The real breakthrough, the Eureka, a moment that would change global commerce, came when he was sitting on a beach in Miami, contemplating the problem while drawing lines in the sand with his fingers. As he idly dragged his fingers through the fine grains, he created a series of parallel lines of varying thickness. In that instant, he had a revelation. He could morph the dots and dashes of Morse code, a language he had learned as a Boy Scout, into a visual pattern. He could take the familiar, efficient language of telegraphy and stretch it vertically, turning dots into thin lines and dashes into thick lines. This linear pattern could then be scanned by a beam of light, and the reflected light could be translated back into data. He had just invented the world's first linear barcode right there on that beach. Woodland and Silver quickly filed a patent in 1949 for their classifying apparatus and method, which described both the linear bullseye barcode pattern and the necessary mechanics to read it. Their original scanner was massive and primitive, relying on a 500-watt incandescent bulb, so powerful it had to be cooled with water, and a sensitive photomultiplier tube designed to read movie soundtracks. It worked, but it was utterly impractical for a grocery store. For the next 2 decades, the patent sat dormant, a brilliant solution in search of the right technology. The laser, invented in 1960, would eventually provide that key. Its precise, concentrated beam was the perfect light source for reading the delicate patterns of a barcode. In the early 1970s, with the patent about to expire, a grocer-led industry consortium called the Ad Hoc Committee of the Universal Product Code was formed to finally create a standard. They ran a famous test in a Marsh supermarket in Troy, Ohio in 1974. At 8:01 a.m. on June 26th, a cashier scanned a 10-pack of Wrigley's Juicy Fruit Gum. It was the first item ever scanned, and it worked perfectly. That pack of gum made history, and the modern barcode was born. The impact of this simple pattern of lines is almost impossible to overstate. It didn't just speed up the checkout line, it completely rewired the entire global supply chain. For the first time, retailers could track inventory with pinpoint accuracy in real time. They could instantly see what was selling and what was sitting on shelves, allowing for revolutionary just-in-time restocking that slashed costs and reduced waste. It gave birth to the entire field of data analytics, as every scanned product became a data point that could be analyzed to understand consumer behavior on a massive scale. The barcode's humble beginning as lines in the sand evolved into the now ubiquitous Universal Product Code, or UPC, and its global cousin, the E&N code. Today, these codes are scanned over 6 billion times every single day, not just on groceries but on airline tickets, hospital wristbands, and library books, creating an invisible lattice of data that keeps the modern world organized, efficient, and constantly flowing. Yet even as barcodes began to bring a new kind of order to commerce, another American innovation was busy transforming a far more magical and emotional corner of our lives, the warm, festive glow of the Christmas tree. For centuries, the tradition of illuminating the evergreen was a breathtakingly dangerous affair. Families would carefully attach thin, lighted candles to the branches of their trees using wax or pins, creating a beautiful but terrifying spectacle. These open flames would often be lit for only a few nerve-wracking minutes on Christmas Eve, with a bucket of water or sand kept close at hand. The risk was immense. Newspapers of the era are filled with tragic accounts of house fires sparked by these festive but deadly candles, turning a celebration into a catastrophe. The man who would forever change this risky ritual was not Thomas Edison himself, but his close friend, business partner, and brilliant chief engineer for the Edison Electric Light Company, Edward Hibbard Johnson. Johnson was a master showman and a relentless promoter of Edison's fledgling electric light system, always looking for dazzling public demonstrations to prove its safety, reliability, and magic over gaslight. His moment of inspiration arrived in 1882. In his New York City home on Fifth Avenue, he decided to take the classic Christmas tree and reimagine it for the electric age. His goal was to create a spectacle so stunning it would make headlines and sell the public on the wonder of electricity. With immense patience and technical skill, Johnson hand-wired a strand of 80 specially made electric light bulbs. He didn't choose simple white. He selected a vibrant, patriotic palette of red, white, and blue. He then carefully wound this brilliant strand around a revolving evergreen tree mounted on a special base, connecting it to a generator. When he flipped the switch, the result was nothing short of miraculous. The tree didn't just glow, it revolved steadily, casting a dazzling, multicolored radiance throughout the room, a spectacle of light and motion that had never been seen before. A reporter from the Detroit Post and Tribune was invited to witness this marvel, and his breathless account, published on December 22, 1882, gives us a window into the sheer wonder it inspired. He described it as a most fantastic and picturesque Christmas tree, and wrote that the light was a continuous twinkling of dancing colors, red, white, blue, all evening. I need not tell you that the scintillating evergreen was a pretty sight. Johnson's invention was a public relations triumph. It was a walking, talking, or rather, a spinning, sparkling advertisement for the safety and potential of electric light. Each year, he would create a new, more elaborate display, increasing the number of lights and attracting bigger crowds and more press. He proved that electricity could create beauty and joy without the constant, lurking fear of a house fire. Yet, despite this dazzling debut, the electric Christmas tree light did not immediately adorn every home. For decades, the technology remained prohibitively expensive and complex. A string of lights in the early 1900s could cost upward of $300 in today's money, a luxury item only for the wealthiest families or for lavish department store window displays. The real catalyst for mass adoption was a tragic event that underscored the very danger Johnson sought to eliminate. In 1917, a devastating fire sparked by Christmas tree candles swept through a New York City apartment, claiming the lives of 2 young children. The public outcry was immediate and powerful, creating a massive push for a safer alternative and finally driving demand for affordable, mass-produced electric lights. General Electric saw the opportunity and began selling pre-assembled kits, and by the 1930s, the once expensive novelty had become a safe, affordable, and essential part of the American Christmas tradition. The legacy of Edward Hibbard Johnson's spinning tree is a glow that now encircles the globe. He took a dangerous, anxiety-filled custom and replaced it with one of pure, safe, and unadulterated joy. His invention did more than just prevent fires. It extended the magic of the season, allowing trees to shine brightly for weeks on end, transforming living rooms into nightly wonderlands and creating a tradition of festive illumination that continues to bring comfort and cheer to millions of homes every December. Yet, even as Edward Johnson's electric lights brought a new kind of safety and spectacle to the home, another inventor was preoccupied with a different kind of safety and freedom, one that played out on the sidewalk during the daily ritual of walking the dog. For centuries, the tool for this task was brutally simple, a fixed-length rope or leather lead. It was a binary system of control. The dog was either held tightly at your heel, restricting its ability to explore and sniff, or it was given the full, often dangerous, length of the leash to dart into traffic or tangle around lampposts and the legs of passers-by. There was no middle ground, no way to grant a pet a measure of liberty while still maintaining a crucial element of control. This frustrating compromise was the problem a young man from Illinois named Frederick J. He set out to solve. In 1908, he looked at this ancient dilemma and saw not an inevitability but a mechanical puzzle. His ingenious solution was to take the core concept of a spring-loaded reel, a mechanism already familiar in tools like measuring tapes, and miniaturize it into a handheld device specifically for our 4-legged friends. He patented a portable reel that contained a spool of cord wound around a central spindle, which was kept under constant tension by an internal spring. The handle housed the entire mechanism, and the end of the cord featured a clasp that could be attached to the dog's collar. The beauty of his design was in its intuitive operation. When the dog moved away, it would pull the cord against the spring's resistance, extending its reach. When the dog stopped or moved closer, the spring would automatically rewind the cord, keeping it taut and untangled. For the first time, a walker could grant their dog 20 feet of freedom with the simple click of a button to lock the mechanism, reeling them back in instantly the moment a car approached or another dog came near. His invention was a masterpiece of pragmatic design, but like many early breakthroughs, it was far ahead of its time. The materials and manufacturing precision needed to produce a reliable, affordable, and durable retractable leash on a mass scale simply didn't exist yet. His patented idea remained a fascinating novelty, a blueprint for a future that would take decades to arrive. The concept languished until the post-World War II economic boom and the rise of suburban living, when pets became increasingly seen as family members rather than just working animals. The demand for pet products that offered convenience and enhanced quality of life skyrocketed. In the 1970s, the German company Flexi finally cracked the code, perfecting the mechanics and using strong, lightweight nylon cord and durable plastics to bring a reliable, mass-market retractable leash to the world. The impact of this modern iteration of Toohey's idea has been profound, fundamentally altering the dynamic of the daily walk. It gave owners a newfound sense of confidence and security, transforming a chore that could be fraught with anxiety into a more relaxed and enjoyable experience for both human and animal. Dogs could now satisfy their innate curiosity, exploring a wider radius of smells and sights at their own pace, which is crucial for their mental stimulation and overall well-being. This grant of controlled freedom often leads to better-behaved pets, as they are less likely to pull constantly against a fixed restraint. The retractable leash became an instant symbol of modern pet ownership, a must-have accessory found in millions of households. Yet, this innovation is not without its own complex legacy and a vigorous debate among dog trainers and veterinarians. Critics rightly point out that the very length the leash provides can be a hazard if not used with extreme vigilance, allowing a dog to build up dangerous momentum before reaching the end of the cord, potentially leading to injuries to their neck or spine. They argue it can teach dogs to pull habitually and offers the owner less direct control in emergency situations. This duality is the essence of so many great inventions. A tool that provides incredible convenience and joy, but also demands responsibility and wisdom from its user. Frederick II, his spring-operated reel, ultimately gave us a choice, a dial we can turn between restraint and freedom, making that simple walk around the block a little bit easier and a whole lot more interesting for everyone involved. But while Frederick II, his leash offered freedom on the sidewalk, a far more profound liberation was brewing for the American living room, one that would shatter the rigid schedule of broadcast television and hand control of the screen back to the viewer. For decades, watching television was a passive, appointment-based activity. You had to be in front of the set at the exact time your favorite show aired, or you simply missed it. The only recourse was the clunky, low-quality VCR, which required fiddling with tapes, setting timers that often failed, and enduring grainy, degraded recordings. The entire system was built for the convenience of the networks and advertisers, not the viewer. Then, in 1999, a little silver box arrived that turned this entire power structure on its head, and its name was TiVo. The brilliance of TiVo, created by the company TiVo Inc., was that it wasn't just a recorder, it was a computer designed specifically for television. It replaced the magnetic tape of the VCR with a sleek, silent, and massive for its time internal hard drive. This digital storage was the key that unlocked a suite of features that felt like pure magic. For the first time, you could pause a live broadcast. If the phone rang during the climax of a drama, you could simply hit pause, take the call, and then resume right where you left off, as if the entire world of television had obediently waited for you. Even more revolutionary was the ability to skip commercials entirely with the press of a button, fast-forwarding through ad breaks in mere seconds without the blurry, high-speed mess of a VCR. But the true killer feature was the season pass. You could tell your TiVo to record every single episode of a show automatically forever. It would seek out new episodes, record them, and store them in a neat, organized menu on your screen. It was the technological birth of the personal television network, curated entirely by you. The cultural impact was immediate and seismic. TiVo didn't just change how we watched TV, it changed our relationship with time and content. It enabled time shifting on a massive scale, freeing families from the tyranny of the prime time schedule. The concept of appointment television began its long, slow decline. This newfound control directly paved the way for the binge-watching culture we know today. While Netflix and other streaming services would later perfect and monetize the model, it was TiVo that first introduced millions of viewers to the irresistible pleasure of watching multiple episodes of a series back-to-back on their own terms, completely commercial-free. The term TiVo itself became a verb synonymous with this new way of watching, much like Xerox had for photocopying, of course. This liberation came at a direct cost to the established economic model of television. Networks and advertisers were absolutely horrified. Their entire business was built on the promise of delivering a captive audience to commercials at a specific time. TiVo's effortless ad-skipping capability was seen as an existential threat. The backlash was fierce and immediate. Legal challenges were threatened, and a wave of panic swept through the advertising industry, leading to desperate and often laughable attempts to counter the technology. Some advertisers tried creating commercials that were so bizarre or cinematic they would be TiVo-proof, hoping viewers would choose to watch them. Others explored product placement within the shows themselves, weaving brands directly into the storyline where they could not be skipped. The tension between TiVo and the media giants was a classic battle between disruptive innovation and entrenched industry power. Despite its revolutionary technology and cult-like devotion from its users, TiVo's story is also one of perplexing what-ifs. The company struggled to achieve mass-market penetration, partly due to the initial high cost of the hardware and a monthly subscription fee, but also due to critical strategic missteps. They focused heavily on patenting their technology and litigation, often seeming more interested in being a licensing company than a consumer electronics powerhouse. They failed to strike crucial content deals that would have made the platform indispensable. This allowed larger, more aggressive competitors like cable and satellite companies to introduce their own, often inferior but cheaper and more integrated digital video recorders, or DVRs, which diluted the market and blurred the unique identity TiVo had created. While the specific TiVo brand never became ubiquitous, its ideas won completely. The features it pioneered, pausing live TV, season-long recording, and ad-skipping, are now standard expectations in every cable box and streaming platform. TiVo's true legacy is not a box on a shelf, but the irrevocable shift in power it created, proving that when you give people control over their own experience, they will never, ever give it back. Yet, even as TiVo gave us control over what we watched and when, another American innovation had long before mastered the art of delivering exactly what we craved, precisely when we wanted it, a hot, juicy, and perfectly customizable meal. The story of the cheeseburger is a deliciously messy tale of contested origins, a culinary arms race where multiple towns across America claim the title of birthplace for this iconic sandwich. The most famous and perhaps most romanticized origin story takes us to the Roaring Twenties in Pasadena, California. The tale goes that in 1926, a 16-year-old boy named Lionel Sternberger was working the grill at his father's modest roadside stand, The Right Spot. In a moment of either sheer teenage curiosity or brilliant culinary inspiration, he decided to experiment. He took a standard hamburger patty sizzling on the griddle and casually tossed a slice of American cheese on top of it, allowing the heat to slowly melt it into a gooey, decadent blanket. When a customer ordered a burger, Lionel served up his cheesy creation. The customer loved it, and according to legend, Lionel dubbed it the cheeseburger. The name stuck on their menu, and the Sternbergers even had the foresight to trademark the term in California a few years later, cementing their claim in the historical record. But as with any good piece of American folklore, the truth is a bit more contested and a lot more flavorful. Rival claims to the cheeseburger throne emerge from several other corners of the country, each with its own passionate defenders. Louisville, Kentucky, asserts that a restaurant called Kalen's invented the cheeseburger in 1934, proudly advertising it as a new taste sensation. Out in Denver, Colorado, the Humpty Dumpty Drive-In stakes its claim from the same era. The reality is that the basic idea of putting cheese on meat is hardly a complex leap of genius. It's a combination so inherently logical that it was likely stumbled upon by countless short-order cooks in countless diners across the nation around the same time. The true innovation wasn't the act itself, but the act of naming it, branding it, and building an entire culinary identity around it. What makes the Sternberger story so enduring isn't necessarily its verifiable fact, but its perfect embodiment of the American dream, a young person working a humble job who has a simple, brilliant idea that changes the national menu. Regardless of its precise point of origin, the cheeseburger's meteoric rise was fueled by the same forces that shaped 20th century America, the automobile and the rise of fast food. As drive-in restaurants and hamburger stands began dotting the landscape from coast to coast, the cheeseburger proved to be the perfect food for this new, mobile culture. It was a complete, self-contained, handheld meal, its flavors and textures engineered for maximum satisfaction. The warm, soft bun, the savory, char-grilled beef. The rich, melting cheese acting as a creamy bridge between the two. It was a masterpiece of edible engineering, and its simplicity made it infinitely scalable. This scalability is what allowed the cheeseburger to become the undisputed cornerstone of the American fast food empire. When Ray Kroc began building the McDonald's franchise into a global behemoth, the cheeseburger was a central pillar of his menu, a consistent, reliable, and profitable product that could be replicated with exacting precision in every single location. The cheeseburger's true genius, however, lies in its blank canvas nature. It is the ultimate platform for customization and regional expression, a food that effortlessly absorbs the flavors of its environment. In the heartland, it might be topped with a thick slice of beefsteak, tomato, and crisp lettuce. In the south, it's smothered in tangy barbecue sauce and crispy onion rings. Out in California, they famously added avocado and sprouts, creating the health-conscious guacamole burger. In Minnesota, they crown it with a slice of cheese not on top, but in the middle of the patty, creating the Juicy Lucy. This incredible adaptability allowed the cheeseburger to avoid being pigeonholed as a mere fast food item. It seamlessly transitioned into the world of gourmet gastropubs, where chefs top premium grass-fed beef with artisanal cheeses, caramelized onions, and house-made bacon jam, often served on a brioche bun. It is a food of remarkable democratic range, equally at home in a paper wrapper on your lap in a car as it is on a porcelain plate in a white tablecloth restaurant. It represents a shared national language of comfort and indulgence, a simple idea so powerfully effective that it became a cultural export as recognizable as jazz or blue jeans, proving that sometimes the most revolutionary inventions are not complex gadgets but perfect combinations. While the cheeseburger satisfied a national craving, our next invention was born from a far more urgent need: the need for survival. In the mid-1960s, America was in the midst of a gasoline shortage, and the chemists at DuPont were racing to develop a new generation of lightweight, durable fibers that could replace the steel belting in radial tires, making cars more fuel efficient. It was in this highly competitive, high-stakes environment that a brilliant and meticulous chemist named Stephanie Kwolek made a discovery that would seem to defy the very laws of physics. Assigned to this project, Kwolek was working with a class of compounds known as polymers, aiming to create a fiber that was both strong and lightweight. The process involved dissolving the polymers in a solvent and then spinning them through a machine to create the fibers. One day, Kwolek was working with a solution that, by all conventional wisdom, was a failure. It was thin, cloudy, and looked more like a runny syrup than the thick, viscous solution typically needed for spinning. Her initial instinct was to discard it as it seemed utterly unpromising. But Stephanie Kwolek was not a chemist who took shortcuts. Her rigorous discipline and innate curiosity compelled her to analyze the solution further, even when everything about it screamed mistake. Against the advice of a technician who feared the thin solution would clog the expensive spinning equipment, she persevered, convinced that its unusual properties might be hiding something remarkable. When she finally managed to spin it, the result was nothing short of astonishing. The fiber that emerged was not just strong, it was phenomenally, unprecedentedly strong. Preliminary tests revealed it was stiffer and tougher than any synthetic fiber anyone had ever seen, pound for pound, 5 times stronger than steel. The scientific community was initially skeptical. Her discovery was so extraordinary that her own colleagues at DuPont requested she repeat the experiment to confirm the results, certain there had been some error. But there was no error. Quirky had discovered the first liquid crystalline polymer, a perfectly aligned molecular chain that could be spun into a fiber of incredible tensile strength. This new material was named Kevlar. Initially, DuPont struggled to find a practical application for this miraculous fiber. Its first major use was, ironically, in the very tires they had been trying to improve, but its potential was clearly so much greater. The true calling for Kevlar revealed itself in the realm of personal protection. For centuries, the only option for stopping a bullet was a heavy, rigid vest made of ceramic plates or layers of nylon, which were incredibly cumbersome and restrictive. Kevlar offered a revolutionary alternative. Woven into a flexible fabric, it could be layered into a vest that was relatively lightweight and comfortable enough to be worn all day, yet capable of absorbing and dispersing the devastating energy of a bullet or a knife blade. The National Institute of Justice established the first performance standards for body armor in 1971, and Kevlar quickly became the gold standard, the core material in soft body armor for police officers across the nation and around the world. The impact of Quirky's stubborn refusal to discard a failed experiment is measured not in patents or profits, but in human lives. It is estimated that since its introduction, Kevlar body armor has saved the lives of over 3,000 law enforcement officers in the United States alone. Its application quickly expanded beyond the police force, becoming essential gear for military personnel, security details, and even for journalists in conflict zones. But the story of Kevlar doesn't end at the bulletproof vest. Its unique combination of strength and lightness led to its adoption in over 200 different applications. It protects firefighters from heat and flames, it reinforces radial tires and brake pads, it shields cables from damage, and it's the critical component in cut-resistant gloves for industrial workers. It's found in the hulls of racing yachts, in the helmets of astronauts, and in the cables of suspension bridges, silently performing miracles of strength everywhere it is used. Stephanie Quirky's legacy is a powerful testament to the role of intuition and tenacity in the scientific process. She was a woman operating in a male-dominated field, whose groundbreaking work earned her the National Medal of Technology and a place in the National Inventors Hall of Fame. Yet she often deflected praise, humbly stating that her discovery was the result of luck and preparedness, but it was far more than that. It was her unwavering commitment to scientific rigor, her willingness to question initial assumptions, and her courage to trust the evidence in front of her, even when it contradicted all expectations, that gave the world one of the most protective materials ever created. Her work stands as a permanent reminder that the next world-changing breakthrough might not announce itself with a bang, but might instead arrive quietly, disguised as a cloudy, unimpressive liquid in a beaker, waiting for a perceptive mind to see its true potential. Meanwhile, in a quiet laboratory far from the high-stakes world of synthetic fibers, a chemist was tinkering with a very different kind of puzzle, one that would eventually twist its way into the hands of millions. The story of the world's most famous puzzle cube doesn't actually begin with its iconic name, nor does it start in Hungary. It begins 2 years earlier, in 1970, with an American inventor named Larry Nichols who was working at the Molecular Research Corporation in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Nichols wasn't trying to create a global phenomenon. He was simply fascinated by the challenge of designing a three-dimensional mechanical puzzle. His ingenious solution relied on magnetism. He constructed a 2 by 2 by 2 cube where each of the 8 smaller corner pieces contained a tiny magnet. These magnets held the pieces together while allowing the 4 vertical and horizontal sections to rotate independently around a central core. He called his creation the puzzle with pieces rotatable in groups, and, confident in his design, filed for a U.S. patent in 1970. Just a year later, unaware of Nichols's work, a Hungarian architecture professor named Erno Rubik was wrestling with a structural problem of his own. He was trying to design a working model to help his students understand the complex movement of 3-dimensional objects and independent parts. His prototype, completed in 1974, was a humble wooden block, held together not by magnets but by an elegantly complex system of interlocking plastic pins, grooves, and an elusive central pivot that allowed the famous 3x3x3 layers to turn without falling apart. Rubik's initial struggle wasn't solving the puzzle, it was actually scrambling it for the first time, and then spending a full month figuring out how to return the colored faces to their original state. He patented his magic cube in Hungary in 1975, and after a slow start, it was licensed to the American toy company Ideal Toy and Novelty Company. They rebranded it the Rubik's Cube and launched it on a global scale in 1980. What happened next is a tale of 2 inventions on a collision course. The Rubik's Cube, with its higher number of moving parts and therefore exponentially greater number of possible configurations, a staggering 43 quintillion, became an overnight, unprecedented international craze. It was the perfect storm of a compelling challenge, bright colors, and satisfying tactile feedback. It spawned world championships, solution books, and a lexicon of its own with terms like algorithms and speed cubing. Over 450 million units have been sold to date, making it the best-selling puzzle game of all time. But this colossal success did not go unnoticed by Larry Nichols. His simpler 2x2 cube had been on the market since 1972, though it never achieved anything close to the same popularity. Seeing the fundamental mechanical similarity in the 3x3 design, Nichols and Molecular Research Corporation took the Rubik's Cube to court for patent infringement. The legal battle that ensued was a classic David and Goliath story, pitting a small American research firm against a global toy giant. The core of the argument was the mechanism that allowed the sections to rotate. The court had to decide if Rubik's more complex internal system of interlocking parts was a distinct, novel invention or merely an extension of the rotating group principle that Nichols had already patented. In a landmark decision, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit ruled in favor of Nichols in 1985, finding that the Rubik's Cube did indeed infringe upon his original patent. It was a stunning victory that affirmed the primacy of the American invention, though it did little to dethrone the cultural supremacy of the Hungarian cube. The ruling was a quiet, legal footnote to a global pop culture tsunami. The legacy of this twisted tale is one of fascinating duality. Erno Rubik's name is forever etched into history, synonymous with the frustrating, brilliant puzzle that has captivated and confounded generations. His version's higher difficulty and satisfying complexity are what made it an icon. Yet, lurking in the patent archives is the undeniable fact that the foundational concept was first crystallized by an inventive American chemist. The story of the cube is a powerful reminder that innovation is rarely a single Eureka, a moment in isolation. It is often a chain of ideas where one person's blueprint provides the crucial spark that allows another's masterpiece to catch fire, leaving us with a timeless puzzle whose own origin story is just as complex and intertwined as its colorful, rotating faces. And so, as we reach the end of our wild ride through 33 of the craziest creations to ever emerge from the American spirit, it's truly staggering to consider the sheer, unbelievable range of it all. We've journeyed from the life-saving embrace of Kevlar vests born from a cloudy beaker to the pure, sugary joy of a Twinkie invented to keep baking pans busy. We've seen how a nuclear war survival project birthed the internet and how a chef's moment of spiteful pettiness gave the world the potato chip. This is the magnificent, chaotic spectrum of American ingenuity, a place where a block of wood can become the sound of rock and roll, and a melted candy bar can transform every kitchen on the planet. It proves that world-changing ideas don't always announce themselves with grand fanfare. More often, they start as quiet observations, as solutions to tiny, personal problems, or even as spectacular failures that someone was clever enough to repurpose. They are born in government labs, on sunny California sidewalks, and on the cluttered tables of suburban garages. This incredible diversity is the real story. The fact that the same national character that produces the solemn life and death gravity of the breathalyzer can also produce the whimsical, delightful nonsense of the super soaker. It's all part of the same brilliant, restless drive to look at the world and ask, what if? So the next time you pick up a remote, pause a live TV show, and settle in to watch something you recorded without a single commercial, think of TiVo. When you hear the satisfying zip of your jacket on a chilly morning, think of the long, winding journey of that fastener from laughingstock to global necessity. Everywhere you look, the mundane objects of your daily life are quietly humming with these incredible stories of risk, vision, and sometimes just wonderfully bizarre luck. Every single one is a monument to a moment where someone refused to accept that this is just the way it is. Now we want to hear from you. What's the most surprising American invention you've ever come across? Did you have your own wait that was American moment while watching this? Let us know down in the comments. Share your favorite crazy creation or a bizarre fact about your own country's history. And if you enjoyed this dive into the wonderful world of What If, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the facts that are stranger than fiction. Thanks for watching.